Good evening, everyone, to our boardroom and those who may be watching us virtually. I'd like to call to order the Board of Education regular board meeting, June 25th, 2024. Are there any requests to speak on closed session items? No requests to speak. We will now adjourn to closed session. Thank you. Good evening, everyone in the boardroom and those who may be participating virtually. I'd like to call us back into open session of the Santa Barbara Unified School Board January is June. It looks like January. June 25th, 2024 meeting. Now we have language access.
Thank you. We have Spanish interpretation. Buenas tardes. Tenemos interpretación al español por si alguien gusta escuchar la reunión en español. And we also have ASL interpretation over Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Maldonado, please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand and face the flag. Put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There was no action taken in closed session. And now we will move to our student board member report. Ms. Anastasia, welcome and thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I don't have too much to report on since it's now summer for all the students. But through the Student Advisory Council, we were able to recruit almost 20 students to go volunteer at the summer schools. So they're all placed at various schools, including McKinley, La Cumbre Junior High, and DP. And I would also like to thank the board for giving me this experience, being the student board member and having this platform to engage with the larger student bodies. But now I would like to let Eric, our new student board member, introduce himself and his goals and what he wants to achieve.
Hello everyone, my name is Eric Gonzalez. I am an up-and-coming senior at Santa Barbara High School, excited to be here to work with the district. I chose to run for the student board member position because this past school year, I got to work with Anastasia, our amazing past student board member. We worked on many great projects, one of them being the summer school tutoring, where high school students are able to tutor other students across elementary to high school. I'm looking forward to another great year of improving school safety and enhancing our school community. Thank you.
Board President, if I may, I'd like to just take a moment to thank you, Anastasia. We do have a small gift for you. I'll come down here. If I can have the board maybe come down here. So I'll take a moment to thank you. These are, sorry. Hard? I'm a person of this one. Me too. Right here. We are so proud of you, and you've done an amazing job being our student board member. We've grown with you, and I hope you've grown as well in the role. Take a really quick. Congratulations. I already say it again. We want to thank you. Sorry, I got to get it on video. For those that are not here, thank you. You've done an amazing job being our student board member, and we've learned a lot from you. You've helped us grow in our engaging of student voice and the projects that you've started, and I know I'm so proud of Eric, who's going to finish them. And you were very persistent in a very patient way that I really appreciated, and we wish you so much happiness and joy and success when you get off to college. We're going to miss you very much. I don't know if somebody else would like to say any words.
No, just thank you for being patient in the midnight hour and leaving when you need to do that. But it's really, you're such a quiet and perspective and brought that here, and just appreciating that, your thoughtfulness, bringing the student voice here and how critical it is for the work that we're doing. So again, thank you so much for saying yes, coming through the application. You still had to say yes, so I appreciate that and wish you well going forward.
Anybody else? All right, so if you can grab your board plate, your name tag. This is your name tag. We're going to keep. I want us to go around and just gather around and take a picture with them.
Picture of you guys, and then we're going to come join you guys for a photo. And then one last one of just Eric. Follow directions very well. Thank you.
Does that include her report?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you again, Anastasia, concluding that report, and welcome, Eric. And so now we'll move to D7, addressing bias and anti-Black action report.
Good evening, President Sims-Moten and board members and Superintendent Maldonado. Tonight we bring to you our report regarding the work that we've been focusing on in terms of addressing anti-Black and biased actions occurring in our school district. So we will bring a full-fledged report to you this evening. Starting off with a quick reminder of the work where it just didn't start this year or last year. We wanted to bring your attention to even when in 2020 when the board passed a resolution. And so, you know, as you could see with all the various resolutions that have been passed, that this has been an ongoing process, including ultimately with a board policy, which sets the standard in terms of the school district, the way we address racism and anti-Black actions. On the right, you'll see in terms of, again, a reminder of the work that we've been doing with creating the various work groups based in, starting off in 2021 and 22 school year, and then going all the way into basically into the end of this school year. One thing I wanted to bring up attention to is at the very bottom is we have the grant from California Department of Education. That is actually a 2-year grant, and so that grant will continue. We'll be continuing to use that grant to fund the work that we'll be doing moving ahead into this next school year. So as well as it is a Goal 3, Action 5 is in the LCAP that's addressing this. So it ties to that as well. At this time, I would like to bring up Dr. Sheffield to discuss the work that we've been doing regarding our students.
Good evening, everyone. So we have really embraced the opportunities to address the needs of our students, more specifically our African American Black students. And so this slide here just highlights some of the amazing things that we have done, as well as addresses some of the partnerships we've made within the community. We have collaborated with Gateway Educational Services, and actually we have done that for the past few years in regards to supporting our students receiving additional tutoring and college preparation, both for our elementary as well as our secondary. In addition to that, we have participated in the Black Youth Summit with them, and then moving into our work with really supporting our students as they embrace college and career. Another partnership that we have made is with Healing Justice Santa Barbara, and they've collaborated with us in regards to supporting us with our Black student unions at our high schools, and then we're also trying to grow them at the junior high space. And so we do have one of our representatives from San Marcos High School here tonight, Zoe, and so I'm going to go ahead and call Zoe up to come and share a little bit of her experience being a part of this program.
Hello, my name is Zoe Rogers. I'm part of the San Marcos BSU. This year, San Marcos BSU has had a hard time getting off the ground, but Healing Justice swooped in and made it possible for us to have all our events. We got to attend the Black is Beautiful Gala, and all our BSU was able to attend. We got to get community service hours and fund for our college journey. We have been so lucky and thankful and fortunate to have Healing Justice working with us because we didn't have a mentor in school, so they stepped in as our adult mentor. They helped us put on our event, which we called, a food festival, and we got to share a little bit of our culture with the rest of the school. We brought in soul food from Soul Bites and taught everyone a little bit about ourselves.
Hey, thank you.
Amazing. If you can go ahead to the next slide, I'll speak to that next slide. Additional work that we have done with Healing Justice is they've really organized our student groups to attend colleges and universities. And so one of our visits was to Santa Barbara City College. And so we took a group of students, a few of our counselors attended, and they had an opportunity to really feel special. And so some of the comments were, this was all for us, and they felt real good about having that opportunity to tour and gain information. In addition to that, we attended the Black College Expo in Los Angeles, so we arranged for junior high as well as high school students to participate in that program. And one of the last things is we have a picture here of some of our students that received grants. And they received grants for some of the work that they have collaborated with to bring money to their Black student unions so that they could build programs and do a variety of things on campus. And so I want to thank you all for allowing us to have this opportunity and working with Healing Justice Santa Barbara.
All right, so going into the next few slides, I want to bring your attention to two data points. One is that we're going to go through the data that we receive regarding the incidents in our schools. That's the first one. And then the second data point that we're going to bring in will be brought to you by Assistant Superintendent Edison. And we're getting not only the responses or the incidents that are occurring, but we're also measuring how the students are feeling with the survey. So we'll be going through that as well. As you could see, this is based upon the data that we shown you in February. We had 57 incidents that have occurred at this time reporting out. And again, broken down by various individuals who reported. As you can see, teachers are the primary reporters of this data. And then from that point, administrators. And then the majority of the incidents are mostly verbal incidents. And then the other part of this in particular is that, again, we want to remind you that we're showing you the responses, not only showing you the incidents that have occurred, but also the responses to those incidents. And just because we had a direct verbal response, you could have a direct verbal response, or teacher talking to a student in particular, and at the same time, the teacher can also contact the parent, or the teacher would contact the administrator, and the administrator would contact the parent, and so on. So it could vary so it could be more than just one incident addressing the responses. Another thing I just wanted to bring to your attention before I bring up Ms. Edison is that if you remember 2 years ago we were doing reports of incidents, and the reports were actually coming from principals. They were the ones who were putting it into the system. And one of the key things that we've shifted from, instead of making it or building it upon the onus of the administrators, it's really building it so everyone on campus owns the responsibility of doing this. And again, just reminding you the key thing that we heard, that we saw, the insight report, was that we heard that adults were not seeing the incidents, not because they didn't physically see it, it's just because for various reasons they have either become numb to it or what have you. So that is why we started the first recognizing the situation, because you can't do anything about it if you don't see it. Then responding to it, and then reporting. So just reminding you, the recognize, respond, and report, as we started last year, we'll continue that process going into next year as we do this work. So, and then that's why you see we have many more incidents being reported by students, staff, and everyone. The last thing I want to point out is that if we don't report the data, then we don't know what's going on, whether it's at the school site, whether it's the district level. So it's very important that we keep track of this work and keep track of what's happening. So with that in mind, I forgot we had one other slide here. So again, going back to the 84 incidents and comparing it to this year. So I would like to bring up Ms. Edison.
Good evening, Board, Superintendent Anastasia. It has been a pleasure working with you, sweetheart. I wish you nothing but success in your endeavors. And welcome aboard, Eric. Look forward to working with you as well. If you recall, we started talking about how we use data to guide decisions as a district who have embraced equity and an equitable MTSS system. So the data that we're collecting around our responses to anti-Black or biased work is not only student outcome data, but it's also our implementation data. So here's some data points that teachers are reporting themselves about, and adults on campus, not just teachers. Sorry, here we go. About how comfortable they feel responding when they see incidents on campus. This is part of our Panorama survey data. Remember, we survey students, staff, teachers, and families so that we can triangulate the experiences. For the most part, we've implemented our modules this year. We want to see growth, and we do see growth in 4 of the 5 areas. When sensitive issues of diversity arise in class, how easily can you think of the strategies? Under pressure, it's hard to imagine what my response should be, so the more we practice it, the more we go over scenarios, the more we give opportunity for growth, we should continuously see that going in the right direction. How comfortable would you be incorporating new material? You know, we just adopted our new curriculum. I'm really trying to make sure that it's representative of our student population, so you can see that is a high mark for us in this area. If students from different backgrounds are struggling to get along in your class, how comfortable are you with intervening? Remember, you just heard Steve say, first we need to recognize and then we respond. And so it went up 5 percentage points. It's going in the right direction. Remember, we do Panorama twice a year so that we can monitor progress in a faster than if we did it a year behind, right? So we do it in the fall and we do it in the spring, and it's going in the right direction. That's what we want to see is growth. How confident are you that the adults at your school can have honest conversations with students about race? 52%, that went up 5%. There's many things that we have going on within the district. It's not to say that one thing is it, but we are being intentional and targeted with our efforts. At your school, how often are students encouraged to think more deeply about race-related topics? This attributes to our social awareness and students understanding their responsibility in the social construct. We didn't have growth, but it also did not go down, so we'll continue to monitor that. Where we're really focusing at is that last one. How well does your school help students speak out against racism? So we have some work to do there, and we do have some plans in place, but we will be progress monitoring that in the fall and the spring this coming up year. Just some of the things that we have in place. Remember, we talk about Tier 1. It's what everybody gets. It's teaching the expectation up front. It's teaching diversity, is teaching all of our core competencies of social emotional learning, which is self-awareness, right? Who am I and how do I show up in this space? Self-management, how do I manage myself so no one else needs to? Social awareness, understanding diversity and appreciating what's around you. Relationship skills, and then responsible decision making. That's what everyone is getting, right? In elementary, we're using Second Step, and at the secondary, we're using BASE. Those are curriculums for SEL. Ripple effects is what some of our students get. Once we've taught the expectation and it's not met, those are those incidents that was just reported on. How do we respond in a targeted and appropriate way, right? Considering the student's age, development, and the situation. Ripple Effects is the tool that we use. It also it's an online modules, has over 400 different lessons, so it can be really targeted to the behavior. We also can calibrate across our entire system to make sure that the lesson and how it's presented is the same. Then adults can follow up with students to make sure they've received the lesson. We've also shared those with parents so that they can partner with us in teaching the expectation and responding when the expectation is not met. The equity leads are working the tier 3, which a few of our students get, that intensive work. That's in development. They're having conversations around how do we pull in other curriculum trained folks on campuses who actually can do this work, are willing to do this work, have the skill set to do this work so that they can be impactful with students. These are just some of the things that are going on. As you know, we are highlighting and trying to create a space where our African American students are seen, valued, supported, and heard on campus, supporting and partnering with our community partners to create a social space where that is just the norm for them, and that also contributes to these tiered interventions. That's the some students getting that.
So as you can see that we've been very busy with this work and incorporating this work into our schools, and we have much work ahead. So at the time, I'd like to open it up for public comment, then questions from the board.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Do we have any requests to speak on this item? Board members, any comments or questions? Didn't see you. Go ahead. No.
Thank you for that presentation. I'm happy to see that things are being tracked and interventions are underway. I'm looking at the Teacher Panorama Survey data. Sorry about that. As I said, I appreciate all the information and the fact that the 3 R's are in place, and we're getting reporting from people outside of just principals, and I'm looking at all the data. And this is really more a question. I think, Ms. Edison, you kind of mentioned this, is when you look at the panorama data, the survey data, I'm looking at the last 2, and it's interesting. At your school, how often are students encouraged to think more deeply about race-related topics? 84%, that looks great. It's a good number, hard to get much higher than that. But then how well does your school help students speak out against racism? And that's the low. And it's sort of interesting to see that dichotomy there, that it's easy to talk about race, but it's apparently not easy to get people to speak out against that. So are you able to tell us some of your ideas on how to move that needle to say, okay, this is not okay, but how do you say this is not okay?
Yeah. So there's 2 parts to that. Building social awareness as a core competency means that we can have open dialogue about race and differences. Racism is the harm that needs more skill and work. So students being able to identify that an act is overtly racist or covertly racist, and responding to it is the work for us to do, because often it's masked in, oh, that was just my friend, they always talk like that, oh, it's just a joke. And so working with students, it's a little more complicated. They may have conversations about race in general, but racism is where we need to do the work.
I know that a lot of these efforts are very focused on groups that seem to be harmed more than others. I do think that all students experience some sort of ism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any sort of work to talk about stories where students talk about what they are experiencing, and it, maybe having that sort of open dialogue where I think having students identify with each other that they may be experiencing different types, whether it be a gender issue or whether it be a race issue or a class issue. Mm-hmm. Maybe, I don't know how in schools that these discussions happen outside of the classroom as a school-wide discussion. I'm just curious if there's any venue for that.
Yeah, so there is work going on our campuses within our ethnic studies department. There's tons of work and conversation happening in those spaces, and then multicultural events that are happening at the campuses as well. Do know, yes, there are more isms happening, and you can see that in our data. Majority of those are anti-Black. African American students are experiencing those, but the tools that we purchase with targeted universalism in mind, which means we purchased them for this specific purpose because there was a void in how we responded to anti-Black actions or speech, but the tool has every ism built into it, so we're using it for all isms. In those modules, there are vignettes from different students also talking about the impact that whatever that ism has had on them and how they changed their environment or changed them or how they mended or was repaired with the person who caused them harm. There's a lot going on our campuses at this moment. I can't recall each site, but I can get that information to you at a later time.
And this is just a comment. I remember in high school, it was very, very difficult, being the age that a person is at high school, to talk about personal experiences or to even understand what is happening to you. You often process these things years later. Mm-hmm. Is there any thought to maybe bringing alumni who have gone on to, they're older, they're whatever, they can talk about their experiences at the high school? I'm just wondering if that might be a way for students who connect with the community to turn around and say years later, this happened to me, I know it's still happening, this is what I think about it, because I think it's hard for students at that age to tell their stories, but maybe an older student can tell their story at a school assembly or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. We can look into that. Currently, in our partnership with Hill and Justice, they do have mentors that are students who are no longer in high school, and so there is that connection with them. But we can totally look at that across our system and see where else that is happening and scale it up if we're getting the results we want from it.
Mr. Escobedo?
Thank you. Thank you for this report. Thank you for the work being done. Thank you for our partners, Healing Justice and Gateway, for much of not only what we're doing now, but getting us started in this work on the front end. And I think one of the neat things about this presentation are those celebrations and joyous moments where we're exposing our students to many different experiences, visiting colleges. I remember, I think it was last school year, there was the BSU cookout or barbecue that President Simone and I attended, and we've been able to attend many of these other occasions. There was the Black is Beautiful Gala where we got to see our students in action. We got all the high schools together. Well, they got all the high schools together to perform, and I thought it was really powerful. And so I just wanted to thank our partners, and I want to say that we will continue to support these efforts, and wanted to start there. So the next place I want to go is the panorama information is really interesting. Is there, I imagine it's much harder task, but are we getting any information or data points from families? So I know that we collect it from students and we collect it from teachers, but what about from the families?
Yes, the questions are sent out and distributed to all families. And our results under school climate, parents who also aren't on campus, but this is their experience with campuses, rate school climate very high. And we don't have that breakup by grade level, but we do just have, because it's a confidential anonymous for parents, but we do have some information to be able to disaggregate it by.
Okay. I'm wondering, so are we able to tell from the data, like it's clear we have an anti-Blackness problem in our schools. Are we able to break out the parents of Black children, so Black families, and pull that data so that we can see what their experience is? Because if we're just looking at the whole picture, it's going to be much different than for those families.
It is optional to report your race for
Okay.
parents. And so, yes, any information data point that we collect, we can disaggregate it by, but it's not a required field, it's an optional field.
I see. And then I'll say that for later. What I actually found interesting in the board memo, and I wanted to commend you all on the board memo because this is probably the most comprehensive board memo that I have seen, and there was a lot of useful information in here, so I would encourage us to continue to put worthwhile information like this in the board memo. Even if it's not in the presentation, it complements it really well. What I found interesting in the board memo was the protocol for addressing incidents of biased and or discriminatory actions. And I think it was about a year ago, we heard from families, we don't know what happened next.
Right.
And that is one of the things that I saw in this document. So I have a couple questions. First, where will this document live? And the second, actually, I forgot the second. So if you could start there, I'll remember.
Well, the first one, we shared with you the draft of that memo, right? And so we will actually be folding it into the safety plans. That's where we discussed, and that was one of the things that came up from the Oversight Committee. They kept saying, so can we have this also incorporated into the safety plans? So we'll give it one more look through in terms of the draft, make sure everything is perfect, at least for that time. So we will be doing that and then distributing that to the schools to incorporate.
Perfect. Yeah, so that was my next question, was actually, did the Oversight Committee see this and recommend it to move forward? For me, on first impressions, it's really good. And it does a good job of providing, I think, the resources that our teachers, staff, and administrators on site were looking for, the guidance. The other question I would be is, how are we going to take what's in this document then and work with our teachers, staff, and administrators to train them on the
To
responses?
educate them,
Yeah.
yes. And that's part of the planning process. You mentioned the Oversight Committee. One of the things that we're doing right now is figuring out when we can get together with them and do a retreat. We need to do some deep planning in terms of how we're approaching the next school year. At the same time, we've been in conversations with the chair, Michelle, Dr. Pettigrew. And so we're moving forward as we go, but we also need their input in terms of how to approach things, in terms of, I know we have our partnership with Healing Justice and also Healing Spaces and other groups like this. But we also need to make sure that we're bringing in additional support to address the exact same thing that you're talking about. One of the things that we want to not forget about is, Ms. Edison actually brought it up, was with our ethnic studies. So there's been a lot of work around that for several years, right? And so it's a built-in system in our schools that helps to incorporate the work that we're talking about. We have equity leads at schools. We're also engaging them as well, and that's been an initial launch this past year. So, but we want to make sure we're capturing and connecting and working collaboratively with our teachers who are doing ethnic studies. And Art Nelson's been part of that discussion. With that being said, it's also crucial to continue to get the input and feedback from the Oversight Committee because we want to align everything. So.
Perfect. And then another question is, the partners that we're working with on this, Healing Spaces, Healing Justice, Gateway, I'm sure there are others on the list. Are we providing opportunities for feedback? So in our partnerships, I'm sure that there are things that we're doing really well that they want us to continue supporting them in those certain ways, and I'm sure that there are areas of opportunity for us to grow in our partnership.
Since you've been leading the partnership.
Yes, we are. And so we meet at the end of the year, we meet with our community partners to kind of get to tell them where our needs are, get information and data from them about what they saw at the ground level, and then talk about how we can tweak and adjust our partnership or plans for the next year. So there's areas we want to scale up, and then there's other areas where, like, could you imagine doing it differently? They also bring those ideas to the table. So yes.
Great. Maybe at some point, it doesn't have to be in a meeting, but maybe in a memo to the board, what some of the feedback is. What are we doing really well? What are some areas where we can grow our partnership?
Reimagining the space is what
there
we
you
call
go.
it.
Reimagining the space. I always take the little phrases that Miss Edison has and use. They're great. One other piece. Okay, so 2 pieces of feedback. One is to make sure that this, especially this protocol, again, I think it is really good. I think it's comprehensive. I think it's what folks were asking for. We're going to use it, and I'm sure we're going to learn some stuff, and we're going to then reimagine it and develop it so that it better fits our needs. But please have it somewhere where it's easily accessible. Miss Edison spoke about in the, I forget what the question was. It was one of the first questions, but it was talking about how prepared do you feel to respond in the moment? And sometimes, honestly, I work at UCSB, obviously, and I can tell you we come across many different things, and sometimes I don't remember how it's supposed to react in the moment. And sometimes I have to ask the student, hey, can you come to my office, sit here, or in a safe space? I'm going to be right back. And what we have is we have this manual that gives you some ideas. It's basically like this about protocols. To-dos, not to-dos, here are some appropriate responses or ideas for appropriate responses, and resources to connect them with. Having it in an accessible place is really important. So somewhere where teachers, staff, and administrators know where to access it and quickly when things do happen, so that if they don't remember in the moment, they know where the resource is. And then over time, they're developing those skills and that knowledge set so that it does become secondhand. But I think on the onset, it's going to be really important that it's easily accessible. It's not just in the safety plans, that it's somewhere tangible for them. And then the second piece is there are probably other situations or aspects where I think we could provide similar supports and protocols for our teachers, staff, and administrators outside of the 3 Rs. Because I think what you all did here is really good work. I think it's comprehensive. It was digestible. It made sense to me. It was something tangible that I'm hoping that on the other end, so families, when they're receiving the follow-ups and the communications throughout, they feel like they're being brought through the process, that they're not just in the dark. I'm just saying this out loud that if there are other areas where we can develop similar protocols like this, it would be really helpful for our staff. I really, really think so. So if I'm going to continue to think about this, and I'll let you know if I have specific areas of feedback, but just going to ask us to try and think about if there are other areas where we can develop similar documents to this for our staff.
I'm literally writing to Tony. That's what I'm doing. I'm taking notes. Let us think on it with you.
Okay.
I like the idea, and I get it. Like that, when you're teaching, you're in that moment, and having to shift does take some time. But we do want these to become muscle memory kinds of practices that over time people will adopt as part of who we are in SB Unified. So I think it's both the implementation, transition, support, and then that's the expectation going forward.
Absolutely.
So I get that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so with that, again, thank you all for this work. I actually, one more question. Are we going to get a presentation from the Oversight Committee next? I remember that they were supposed to come back with some recommendations or possibly making them an official advisory group.
So the Oversight Committee won't be coming back until August.
Okay.
Yeah, so because we definitely will be doing the retreat, and then during that time, we can bring them back.
Okay, thank you.
Anastasia?
I just had a clarifying question about the video modules.
Yes.
So when are those given to students, and how do you decide who is going to watch them?
So the video modules, are you talking about, is there, which,
Like on the
Probably.
triangle, it was like.
oh, yes,
Yeah.
here, Kenya, that's, it has to
When
be
you're trying here.
space, and.
I thought you were talking about the staff modules.
Yeah, that's why I was, all right.
Yes. So it's based on who's involved in an incident. So there's a module for the one causing the harm. There's also modules to help along those students who have been harmed. So it would be a response to an actual incident. It's not a tier 1.
So someone would have to report the incident, and then when it's getting taken care of.
Yep,
we
that's
watch it.
exactly
Okay.
what happens.
Thank you.
Mr. Banning?
I just want to share the compliments and kudos that you've been hearing. I want to say particularly how important a tool like Panorama is. For years we've been dealing with Healthy Kids surveys and things that are irrelevant and kludgy and don't give you good information, and it's really refreshing to see a document like this that can provide value the way it does, and it's not typical. And so kudos to you, to the school district, for having this kind of information. Without it, much of this information just can't be gleaned. So that's one thing. I also have a technical math question for you. On the percentage, the Panorama percentages, the second number has a percentage sign after it. This is just a simple question of, does it represent that many percentage points or a percentage of the previous number?
That percentage points increased.
Okay, thank you. I want to say that the work that's going on in this is hard work, and any kind of results like we're seeing are worth celebrating. We absolutely have to continue this kind of thing. And I want to say compliments on giving us the tools, the training, the actions, more than just platitudes, because it's easy to talk about. It's easy to say that we're doing things, but there's actually action behind this, and I just want to I want to give you all the praise for making sure that those things happen. And it is a function of leadership at every level of the district that this kind of thing can happen. Thanks.
Thank you.
Ms. Meadows? So thank you. Thank you for the report. It's good. I was just pondering here, when this all started in terms of why we're here today. And so I think it's really important, particularly when we're talking about anti-Blackness. I think it's still uncomfortable for folks to talk about it. And so it's sometimes easier to clump it in a lot of things. But if you were here, heard it, saw it, the hurt and the harm that continue to happen, that has historically not been addressed and has sometimes been combined and not targeted at the way that it needs to be targeted. In the sense that, so when our Black African American students, whether that's when they are being onboarded or coming, stepping on a campus, or now enrolling their students, families are coming in to enroll their students, that they feel safe from the very beginning. Because this is good work that we're doing, and we're here giving ourselves a chance, because we took on, yes, we have to face what the evaluation came to us, the survey that came to us. And so I think it's so important to not minimize why we're here and keep it at the forefront of why we're here. So when our African American students and family feel safe, then we've made some huge changes. And until that happens, I know we're going to continue to work, and we've done a lot of things to make sure that's good. So I don't want to minimize the work that has been happening, but I don't want to minimize how we got here either. And students, Black African American students are feeling unsafe here. They continue to do it, and we're trying to figure out, and I appreciate the adapting of tools, conversations that we're having, the board's having conversations about it to ensure, because I would like to see our students come and say, I now feel safe because of this. That's the result I'd like to see, right? We can have reports about this and about things that we're doing, but until the person whom the harm was done come up and share the things that we're doing, that they now feel safe, that's an end goal that we need to always look for. And I think when we have our students, particularly who are feeling less safe, and once we start to look at that level, I think as Ms. Essen said, we start here, then we're going to do everybody else because it's going to encompass everybody. Just making sure that we continue to have the courage to say, this is the reason why we're here, and we want to make sure that our African American students, beyond this moment, still feel safe, and that we're creating a system beyond us here that will continue to have them feel safe, and all students feel safe when they come to Santa Barbara Unified. So with that, I'd also say, like, back in the day, I know it was, some years ago, many years ago, we used to have assemblies, and I don't know how we do that, because I used to, students would sit and they have assemblies come, and people come, such as you're saying, that are coming and speaking, and that's a general. Everybody is in the same place hearing it. So I don't know if that's something we might want to consider as well, bringing back assemblies that could address a lot of things, and, and then having students write a play. That we have some great artistic students that can really talk about that, can speak to that, and sometimes hearing from the students, then adults can get it as well. So that was that. And then I'm always, and I can appreciate starting early, because we got to start way upstream to start to look at this and address this in terms of how we can change attitudes about that, and how we are, again, when people are enrolling their children for the first time, they need to be able to feel that. That's who we are at Santa Barbara Unified. You're going to feel safe there. You're going to have a great educational experience, is our outcome to do that, and we're going to put into place, and we have in our systems that's going to be able to address that. Whether you're students, whether you're a family, whether you're faculty, you're going to feel safe in that. And lastly, I say, I hear things, and I can, I'd like to, I think it's very appropriate here in terms of about attitudes, because that's another thing too. It's about changing the attitudes. And someone said somewhere that attitudes are like flat tires. You're going nowhere until you change it. So let's, think about those things. How do we change our attitudes about it as well? And I think that will help with becoming more comfortable with it. And so I really appreciate you got to recognize it, what is my attitude saying toward it? So in that sense of that. So I want to say I can appreciate where we're going, and I also want to be mindful of how we got here and how do we continue to use this opportunity, because it is an opportunity to move and change things, and I see the change in that, and I really ultimately want to see students come up here that have been harmed to come and say, it has changed for me. And so that's an ultimate outgo. And Zoe, I want to appreciate you coming. I actually met you at the Black and Beautiful Gala, coming here and sharing that, because I know Black student unions have kind of not had the support that they need. So I'm thankful for Healing Justice coming in and supporting you, and you reporting that and sharing that, how you appreciate that. And we want to continue to do that, and making sure that we're giving our students the support that they need and who they are, and meeting them where they are to be able to uplift where we're ultimately trying to go in Santa Barbara Unified. So thank you again for your report. Any additional comments, board members? Okay.
So before we leave, I just want, as part of the team, because this is a team effort, that we thank you for your support to do this work. We understand that not all community leadership is the same. And so we cannot do this without your support, and we're shifting gears. We're going into third gear right now. So we really appreciate that as we're moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. So we will now move to our public comments. D9, Mr. Escobedo? Student report. I didn't know if you're going to do it after. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening again, board members. In today's board agenda, we have several reports, and it's an important meeting because, as you know, we are adopting the 24-25 budget for approval. And just a reminder that this budget is really based a lot on projections and assumptions about the state of our fiscal budget buckets that Kim will speak about a little later. As we look to next year, we do notice that some of our revenues are coming in below normal, particularly from the property taxes. She'll be explaining some of that. We did notice also that our reserves are projected to fall below a little over 5% in the next 2 years. So we're going to be tightening our belt. And I just wanted to start my superintendent report with a little bit of that sobering reality, that we're going to need to do a lot of work starting in July, looking at just the way we're structured overall. And to borrow Ms. Edison's phrase, to reimagine our school district and what will be essential. So you'll hear more about that from Kim a little later. I also wanted to bring forward a little bit on the LCAP presentation. I know that you've been hearing a lot about the development of the LCAP and also the development, the feedback we have gotten from the LCAP. Oops, going back, one. Maybe it's not going to work that I do it from here. Nope. It's going in the opposite direction. All right, I'm going to skip the budget graphic because I can't show it. You'll see it later, no worries. Who's moving it now? Somebody else is? Okay, I won't touch it. This takes a lot of practice. For the LCAP, as you know, we have 3 buckets of goals. We have goal 1 around academics, goal 2 around behavior, social, emotional, and wellness, goal 3 around culture and climate. As you know, even though most of our money is from property taxes, we are held to the same compliance and standards and expectations that all school districts in California are held to, and that's why we have money set aside that's called LCFF supplemental and concentration money. That's $22 million. That is our LCAP funding. But overall, you can see where our funding sources are coming from with both federal, state, and local monies here. Go to the next one, please. So I do want to talk a little bit about, so what are the goals and metrics we're going to be using in the new LCAP? And this is something we haven't really discussed a lot with the board. I want to introduce some of these topics today, but please know we will go into these a little deeper throughout the year. So distance from standard is a term that's used, or a metric that's used by the California School Dashboard to evaluate school districts and schools. And it measures how far, on average, all students are from meeting the standards set by the state's annual assessments for English language arts and math. You can see here in orange, it's the 22-23 Santa Barbara Unified baseline. We are negative 6.1 from the standard compared to the state, which is on average negative 37.4. So we're doing better than the state in English language arts. In mathematics, we are negative 13.6 from the average standard, whereas the state is negative 49.1. So on average, we are doing better than state. And I'm going to pause there because I'm looking at Gabe's face.
I think you misspoke a little bit.
Did I misspeak?
Yeah, so we're negative 6.1
from the
English,
average standard.
From English, and then I think the state average was negative 13.6.
Did I say it wrong?
Yeah.
I read it wrong. My apologies. The state is negative 13, and in math, we're at negative 37, and the state is negative 49. Thank you. So you can see distance from standard is a little hard to understand and harder to explain. But the point is we're doing better than average from the state. And that is the good news for Santa Barbara Unified. And again, these are metrics that we will be using, that we will be bringing forward. Now you can see the bottom there, it says, we're still looking at 23-24 data because as you know, we just finished testing this spring. We will be receiving the official scores in October. However, some of our principals are already able to look at some of their test scores in a system that's called TOMS. And so we have heard from a few principals who are seeing some movement, but I don't really want to get too excited till we get the official scores. But I am proud of all the accomplishments of all our teachers and our principals in this work. So the next slide, please. So what does the LCAP say we're going to then accomplish in the next 3 years with this new plan? Here you'll notice that currently, again, we're negative 6.1 in English, and our goal by 25-26 with this new LCAP plan is that we're going to achieve 10.1, which is above the standard. In mathematics, we're currently at negative 37.4. Our goal is to reduce that to negative 25. We used a formula, which I know that Mr. Vance can explain better once I'm done with my presentation, if you'd like to know more about why we went to from negative 37 to negative 25. You would think we would want it to be above the standard, We also know that some of this progress takes time. We know we've adopted a lot of new curriculum recently. In junior high school, we're going to be introducing new math curriculum. In elementary, we adopted math curriculum in 2019, right before the pandemic, and we've been looking at how that's being implemented, and we have found pockets where it's not being used as it should be used, and or we still have some more teacher learning to be done in mathematics in the elementary space, even though there's been an adoption there. So those are some of the targets we've set for goal 1, some of the metrics we've set. Steve told me don't say goals, say metrics for English and math. Next slide. For the area of emergent multilingual students, there are 2 measures. We look at both reclassification rate and the amount of students that are becoming long-term English learners. You'll notice that we have a 25.5% reclassification rate as our baseline. Now we've switched the colors. Now the baseline is blue and the target is red. And our goal for 25-26 is that we increase that slightly to 28.5. Now I want to make sure that you understand we will never reach 100% reclassification rate. That's unrealistic. That's not the way language proficiency works. And we will be very measured in the way that we do this, because the goal is not to suddenly reclassify all students and magically make them all proficient. This work takes time, but we know that we definitely don't want that number to go down. And it also determines on it's contingent on the number of students in the pool each year, the grade level, and the number of years they've been an English learner. What we also want to look at, though, is who are kids not reclassifying. And what we want here is for long-term English learners, that number needs to go in the opposite direction, which is down. So we've had 7.1% of our students being labeled as long-term English learners, and our goal is to reduce that to 4% with this LCAP plan. Next goal, or next slide. The next one is the area of graduation rates and meeting UC, CSU graduation requirements, otherwise known as A through G. Again, our current baseline is 92% of our students are graduating from high school, and we want to increase that to 95%. 63% of our students are meeting A through G, and we want to increase that to 70%. I know that one of the questions that may be going through your mind is, so what does that look like under each of the designated groups? We will bring that in the future. Today I'm just going very big, high balcony level information for you. Next slide. Under goal 2, we have behavior, social, emotional, and wellness. The state really wants us to look at attendance rates and chronic absenteeism. You'll see here our baseline is 92.4. We want to increase that to 96.4, which means we need to reduce chronic absenteeism from 22.5 to 14.9. And this is a trend that we know is happening across the state, but we certainly want to do better with it. So one of the things that we think about a lot, this is a state metric. What the local control accountability plan allows us to do is to also think about what are our local measures for what we want to achieve. And that's the next slide. You'll notice that we look at the culture and climate to measure some of this. And it's great that you mentioned Panorama, because Panorama survey really is getting us. So why do kids come to school? Well, when they're little, they come because their parents bring them and they're forced to be there. They don't have a choice. They can't stay home when they're 5 to 12 years old. But as they get older, we really need to be talking about student engagement rather than attendance. So what do we have in place to engage our students? And here again, we want to improve the survey results of teacher-student relationships in grades 3 to 6 from 76% to 86%, and in grades 7 through 12 from 56% to 66%, and we'll be using the Panorama survey to measure that. And the next slide will show how students are reporting, responding favorably to their school climate. And you'll see the numbers here. I won't read them to you, but you can see where we have some work to do in the grades 7 through 12 area, and also just in general with our teachers and our staff, because improving our school climates involves both students and teachers and staff. So we'll be using these as our local measures. Next slide. So to end my board report today, so let me, before we go to this video, so just once again, I just want to share with the board, introduce the goals, give us a chance to each meeting kind of break it down further and further and give you a really good sense of where this LCAP plan is going. You've heard a lot about the actions in the last couple of meetings when Steve Vance has reported the investments we have made. And please know that every year we get to re-look at some of those investments and think about, so how are we doing towards those goals? The LCAP is using CASP. Don't forget, we will still be doing screeners of our own. For example, we do screeners in kindergarten when kids first start. We have assessments in elementary for STAR literacy for grades K to 2 that we will, transfer into the next grade if they were given at the end of the year some assessments so that the new teacher can look at those, along with our formative assessments throughout the year. So we're not waiting for these scores to tell us what's wrong. These are just sort of dipsticks that are used to measure school districts across the state. So with that, I want to end today's report with a video about our translation and interpretation pathway, which is one of our efforts around improving EML's programs that value bilingualism, multilingualism. We know that's a 21st century skill that we really want to emphasize in our school district as we continue with dual language at McKinley, Santa Barbara Junior High, and Santa Barbara High. And this is a video that just talks a lot about the current graduates of the translation and interpretation pathway from Santa Barbara High School.
Our translation interpretation program is the first of its kind as a CTE program in the state of California. We work on the basics of translation and interpretation, both the code of ethics, skills, and different industries where we would use that exist in this field. I'm going to Cal Poly. I plan on studying fire science and then minoring in Spanish as well, just to keep those skills. I do think that one thing we learned from one of our guest speakers, Lena Morana Cereto, was the concept of language justice. And so taking that advocacy work wherever they go. And that's a lifelong skill.
So I plan on just in the medical field, if that's where I get to, being able to help patients.
We really promote both the translation, interpretation field, but then also being bilingual in wherever you go and whatever you do. And knowing that language access or language justice is something that we should all focus on everywhere.
My first language was Spanish, and I just wanted to sharpen the knowledge in it. I don't speak it at school too much, and so I really wanted to incorporate it into my everyday life more than just speaking it out loud.
Allowing students to dive deeper into the areas that they're interested in. We do a lot of career and school research, and so kind of allowing them that time to find okay, how does being bilingual fit into my future?
Spanish has always kind of been involved in my life. It was my first language. Doesn't necessarily mean it's my strongest language, but I know it'll definitely help out in the future.
So next year we're actually launching our third class. So it'll be a full-blown CTE pathway with Translation Interpretation 1, Translation Interpretation 2, Translation in the Community, which is the third class. And so that would allow for a lot more integration into the school and kind of working at different events and stuff. So, and then, just seeing where we go from there.
So I do want to end with letting you know that my first job in high school was a translator for the operator, which probably nobody here will know what that means. But I would translate calls between the operator and a caller. And the operator could tell the coins dropping, if it was a quarter, a dime, or a nickel. And I'm dating myself. And then one of the first jobs after college was a translator for the Los Angeles Unified School District. When I was advised, hey, since you're bilingual and you have a college degree, do you want to be a teacher? So that is why I'm here today. And so I'm very proud of this work. And I do, I just think being bilingual is an incredible asset, and we should curate as much of it as we can for so many of our students. Even those who are English only speakers, we should add a second language to their bag of tools when they grow up. So that is my superintendent report. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. That's a very comprehensive report. I really appreciate the overview with regards to the budget and all that information. I think that's a critical piece and should be part of your report, if even just a small summary about that. So, and appreciate the program too. I think it's important to also know that we can have a second language to be able to do that, whether it's we can beyond our first native language to do that. So I encourage that. So with that, I think we're moving to Mr. Escobedo with regards to public comment.
Yes. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see you all. We have 2 public commenters for items that are not on today's agenda. Each speaker will get 3 minutes. There's a clock to your right when you're standing at the podium that's right above the door. There are lights on the podium. It will turn yellow when there are 30 seconds left. First up, we have Rich Lashua, followed by Wendy Whitehead. Welcome.
Here we go. How about that? Okay. Thank you for celebrating the arts at the last board meeting, including the beautiful soloists from La Cumbre Junior High's production of Annie. However, Alyssa Walsh, their theater teacher, shared with me that her one theater class is not being renewed for this coming year. Remember when almost 900 people signed an open letter about the elimination of Santa Barbara Junior High's music program and suddenly Mr. DuPont was allowed to hire a new music teacher? Results were detailed in a May 20th Parent Square message, carefully adding, there will be no changes to the arts or creative elective offerings to La Cumbre Junior High next year either. Again, in the May 31st budget report message, there are no cuts to ongoing K-12 programs and no deferrals in funding. Mr. Brock's a competent principal who's lobbied diligently to establish the only IB junior high in the district. It's unlikely he'd overlook vibrant performing arts in that vision and then defy multiple messages from the district about cutting the arts. I conclude this came from above his head. You're approving the budget tonight. About $17,000 would restore Ms. Walsh's one theater class. Surely reserve funds are for an emergency such as this? The district has millions in reserves. All kids have the right to performing arts programs in their neighborhood schools. For almost a year and a half, I've been your canary in the coal mine. Junior high performing arts programs have been in crisis for years, with 2 of our 4 campuses at critical and the others soon to follow. Almost 900 community members signed an open letter against removing one music teacher this spring. Do you think they'll be okay with losing a theater teacher? Or a year or 2 from now when you're closing entire departments on multiple sites? Please remember the strong history supporting arts education in our community. This is why our junior highs have the Marjorie Luke Theater and the Joanne Keynes Theater. 2 major obstructions remain directly in the board's power. Intra-district transfers have brought white flight and consolidated resources to the privileged at the expense of our most disadvantaged students. The board, not the union, has the power to correct that flow of students. The matrix of need used for the arts grants was great. La Colina is building its bell schedule around MTD's buses because not enough students can walk to school. This should seem bad. Give Brock and DuPont even more flexibility and funding to do what they deem best for their sites. As teachers, we are encouraged to continually accommodate our neediest students to the best of our ability to ensure their success, even to the semblance of unfairness. Please follow this model with all our schools. These both can't be solved tonight, but little $17,000 steps are quite possible. I urge this board to find long-term solutions because it's already ugly, and by this time next year, I believe the polite term for it would be fecal hurricane. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Wendy Whitehead.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I didn't know we had 3 minutes or I would have come with both of my topics, but I came a month ago and I asked you guys to start an investigation about why my claim to get reimbursed for doing my boss's job for 13 years, who made me do it year after year after year for 13 years until I found out it wasn't my job, that it's his job on the job description that you guys have posted. So I confronted him and I reported him here to the district. And at that point, Ken Rivas said that we could make a claim against working out of my class. And I said, look, I don't want to keep poking the bear and making, Dan upset. Like let's just let it go. And then when everything happened in like August of 2023, Ken and I made it very clear multiple times to Tara Weiss that we're making a claim to get reimbursed for me doing Dan's job for 13 years. And you guys have a policy that I can do a 3-year claim to get reimbursed. I did that. And Tara Weiss came back and said, I'm sorry, you missed the 1-year time limit. I said, when did that even start? And nobody ever told me. It is written nowhere in your paperwork that there's a 1-year time limit. And when we told Tara multiple times, she never once told us, you better hurry up and get that in, because Ken and I were preparing for the Skelly meeting. So we figured we'd get it, we'd turn it in. And once we did, it got denied. And we're just shocked. Ken and Carlos, myself, we had no idea. They've worked with multiple people who have asked for reimbursement, and neither of these gentlemen have ever even heard of this 1-year clause. So I called John Becchio to find out how the investigation's going, because it's been a month, and I know now he's out of the country on vacation, but I haven't been able to get any response or anything about how that investigation's going. So I'm here to say, here I am, because I did the job every year, days, weeks, months, and years, and it's not fair. So,
Ms. Wyatt, thank you so much. Continue to come into the board. I know Ms. Peak is here. I know this is ongoing, but she's here. If you can talk to her, and Mr. Becchio is out of time, but we have someone here who can also continue to, as you work through this process.
So is that who I need to call tomorrow?
Yes, Ms. Peak.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
I'll do that, and I'll see you in 2 weeks at my next topic.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment.
Okay. Thank you with that. Thank you, Mr. Escobedo. Board members, any comments or correspondence you'd like to share today? Hearing that, Mr. Escobedo has some.
So the last 2 weeks, there's been a lot going on and a lot of celebrations for many, many reasons. But I was able to attend the promotions for Franklin Elementary, Roosevelt, Lacumber Junior High with Mr. Banning, and then Dos Pueblos High School to see Anastasia walk across the stage, and with Dr. Maldonado, got to celebrate her. And then in the last 2 weeks, there was also the celebration of the 100-year anniversary for Roosevelt Elementary, which was quite amazing to see generations of folks that attended Roosevelt to be there at the same time and celebrating amongst each other. We also saw Mr. Lashua dancing with his wife, which was so cool to see them celebrating as well. And just an all-around fun event. The next thing that I attended was actually at San Marcos High School with Mr. Zucchelli, and we got to witness San Marcos High School's first chemistry day with Harding Elementary School. And it was amazing. And essentially what Miss Tilton and Miss Lambert did, well, they invited me, but what they did is they had their students, their AP students, teach chemistry to elementary school kids. I know one of the classes was Miss Bordowski, and everything from they made these I don't even know what I would call them, and I'm sure that they're gonna, if they see this, they're gonna laugh at me. But it was like this charcoal snake. There was a gummy bear that they had lit on fire safely. um, and making lava lamps. They froze Cheetos and marshmallows and let the kids eat them using liquid nitrogen safely. It was just so cool to see our high school students in the role of a teacher and doing it so well and being so interactive with our elementary students. It was just an all-around amazing event to see, and I just wanted to thank Miss Tilton and Miss Lambert for inviting me to join, and I'm glad that Mr. Zucchelli also got to see it. I think he would attest it was a very, very well done event. Next is we had on June 6th at Franklin Elementary our very first community meeting for the Parma School site, where we have partnered with the Housing Authority of the City of Santa Barbara to develop housing for our employees. And this is the first sketch of what that building might look like. And it is beautiful, is the first word that I would say. I think when we did a tour of all of the Housing Authority properties, it was very clear that the standard that they have for what they build and the quality of life that they want people to have when they live in their deed restricted units, they want you to walk by the building and never know that it was affordable housing. And I think for each and every one of their projects, and as this sketch shows, they do exactly that. I would never think in a million years before getting involved with affordable housing that something like that would be affordable housing deed restricted. So we're really excited. We had more than about 60 people, I think, register for the first session. And so because they registered, they get information throughout the process. And this is just the first of many opportunities for people to give feedback. There was a lot of positive feedback. There was also some concerns shared about traffic and parking and circulation, all of which I'm really happy that we partnered with the City of Santa Barbara's Housing Authority because they have so much experience in addressing those issues. They've done it time and time again. They're really good at the public process of getting input, incorporating it into the project, solving for the things and the concerns that people have. And I have no concern at all. I think they are going to do the exact same thing for this project. There's also in this, we'll come back to the board when there are more details solidified to show you what this project's going to look like and what the units look like, and also there's going to be a little play space for an open space for our kids because we want to. President Sims-Moan really led on this one and made sure that this is built for families and with families in mind. So I'm really excited to eventually, at some point, bring this back to the board so that you all can see what this is going to turn out to be. But really excited to have the first meeting done and looking forward to the next one. And the last update that I have is that on Sunday, we got Dr. Maldonado and myself got to go to the open house for the Boys and Girls Club on Canon Perdido, and really excited to do a tour of the space. Even more excited that one of our own, Mark Alvarado, is going to be the new executive director of that space. And so to hear some of his vision, I got to walk through the Boys and Girls Club with him. For those of you that don't know, when he was in our school district, he went to the Boys and Girls Club, and so he has some ties there. And to hear about how he wants to create relationships with what we're doing at our junior high and our high school there, Santa Barbara High School and Santa Barbara Junior High, and build those pathways for kids and also create a space that's engaging, welcoming, and safe for our children. It was beautiful. The community showed out, and I just wanted to thank Mr. Alvarado for inviting us to be a part of the event. And that is my board report.
Thank you for that. Mr. Banning.
I also wanted to report on a couple of visits. I attended several promotion graduation. I started at the Alta Vista High School Quetzal Alternative Ed that happened in the Sunken Gardens, and just wanted to say that it was full of wonderful stories. teachers talked about stories for each of their children, and our own Denise Alvarado was a keynote speaker and told us her story, and I learned that she was a product of alternative education, and what great stories to hear. Everywhere I went at these promotions and graduations, there were stories in one form or another that just made you feel good about what we're doing. At Santa Barbara High School, the stories, nobody was talking about students individually, but there were a group of students who spoke so eloquently about their experiences, and the stories were very clear by the enthusiastic response of the kids and the audience and people that waited hours to be in that beautiful facility. At Monroe, I attended a promotion where every sixth grader that promoted had told their teachers or written what they would be doing 10 years from now. And each one of them walked by while it was being read what they were going to do. And almost exclusively, it included lofty, exciting career goals and college participation. At the La Cumbra promotion, we saw the stories of the kids that were on stage, students from the band. Where eighth graders came and joined the band, and they performed, and a couple student speakers and singers. It's really an exciting time of year, and I just wanted to say that it was really refreshing to see firsthand the stories in different respects from each one that happened. I also wanted to say that over the past year, I've been a fairly regular attendee at the Adelante Charter School Board meetings, and just wanted to report back the confidence I have that they're doing great work there, and they're putting their own LCAP together, and they're dealing with their budget, and they're looking at what happens with our negotiations and our salary schedules and trying to figure all that kind of stuff out. And I just want to say that what I gather most from those is passion and enthusiasm from the families and the children and the teachers that participate there. That's my report. Thanks.
Additional reports, Ms. Minos?
Yes, I wanted to thank Dr. Maldonado for her video, for her report, and especially the language access video that you showed. Certainly, like many of us that have grown up with two languages as a child, I used to interpret for my parents when I was 6 or 7. And in charge for my dad's handyman work and such. And when I started, God knows how I did that, but when I started working at a hospital, at St. Francis Hospital here locally, was the first one I worked at, I was asked to translate for the patients and their families and such, and got into to learn a lot about the medical field from that. And so I, applaud all the students that are putting their effort into that, and know that they will do good in terms of, like it was said in the video, just advocating for the community and making sure that communication happens and such. So thank you. I also had the pleasure of attending the graduation ceremonies, the one for the alternative high school with Alta Vista, La Cuesta, and Quetzal. It was with pleasure that I heard Denise Alvarado share her thoughts with the students and their families. So thank you. Thank you for that. I know it hit home, with the students. So special to hear all the teachers as you mentioned about Mr. Banning, about, sharing the stories of the students, what their dreams are, what their aspirations are, how they each express themselves in terms of their graduation apparel, in terms of their graduation cap, and such. It was just very special, very awesome. And, still remember many of the speeches that were given that day. I also had the pleasure of attending the San Marcos High School graduation with Dr. Carla Curry and with our president, Sims Moten, seeing the excitement of the high school students. Mr. Dare Holdren is awesome as a host to making us welcome, and his speech to the students and such, and getting them engaged. So, also seeing all that, all the youth and all that individual expression and the family's excitement for their graduates. Just one of the huge perks of being a board member, and then seeing Miss Kavya come on and graduate, and was very special. Very proud of her and her service as a student board member to us. So, thank you.
Additional comments, board members? Mr.
I was also able to attend several graduation events. This is kind of the start of my attending events as a board member. And I went to the Franklin University partnership graduation, and the sixth graders all had their capstone projects, which were super fun. So it was a very joyous celebration. It's a fun school. It seems to have such ties to its community. So there were all sorts of people there that were part of the community, parents, students. So it was a really joyful occasion. I also went to the EML graduation with Ms. Martinez, and it was very small, but the families were so clearly proud of how much their students had accomplished. It really has been hard work for them to graduate, and this was graduating in terms of fluency, not necessarily from high school, but graduating into becoming proficient in English language. So that was really, once again, a very joyous occasion. And then also the Santa Barbara Senior High graduation, which was extra special for me, and I think also for Dr. John Becchio, because our children graduated, and as you may know, this is the 100th year, 2024, the 100th year for the high school. So it was a lot of fun, and once again, a perk, as Ms. Munoz says, of being a board member, to just participate in all of these celebrations. So that was a great thing for me. Thank you.
Thank you. I echo all the comments of my fellow and sister board members. Just in terms of 3 words, graduation and promotions, right? It's the combination of all the work that goes in throughout the year, all the late nights and all the grading of the papers, everything, and to see the faces of all the students. They're so happy and they're so proud. So just celebrating the work that they did as well. And I got to attend with Mr. Banning and Ms. Munoz with regards to the graduations, and they all stand out and they're all very special. But there was a young man there at the Alta Vista. He was a Native American. He did his whole Native American dress, not an outfit, but a dress. He actually made that and wore that. And I talked to him for a little bit, and he was just saying that he was kind of on a wrong way of path, but then he found out who he was, and then he knew exactly where he needed to go. So I think that's so important that we create this space that the kids find out who they are, and then they can figure out how far they can go with that. But he was so proud of that, and it was just wonderful to see the detail in the research that he did to have that be very authentic to him and really lead where he goes from there. And so those are always so very special. I sign up immediately. Okay, I'll be there next year. Just to appreciate that. And of course, the added was Miss. Why am I forgetting her name right now? I'm looking right at her. Miss Alvarez, Alvarado, because she's a friend. Because I'm always confusing her with a friend, Miss Alvarado. I was trying not to confuse those names. So Miss Alvarado speak to that, and it really spoke to those. And often when our students, sometimes they don't see themselves in our adults, but they certainly saw that. And I saw them paying particular attention to what she had to say. So I think sometimes kids don't think adults have struggled. So to share that was really, really important, so they saw that. So I just really always just very proud. And also at San Marcos, we're walking around and people are waving them like they were waving at Dare. They were not even thinking about us. So, just in terms of how they love him, just appreciate him as a principal. You saw that, and you saw that with the chest bumps that was going on with with the students to him. So they were like totally like he was like a football player, and they could really be rough with him, and they didn't have to just do the traditional shake. So they were fist bumping. So they were having a good time and really just appreciated, going to that next step and to see how happy they were to be able to do that. So just again, that's that one perk that you be able to see that, because we're not in the classrooms every day, but when we see that hard work, we can see it when they walk across the stages at all levels. So with that, I think that concludes all our board comments and our correspondence. So and board members, I want you to make sure you're doing self-care as we're moving through the evening. So E1, we're going to move to acceptance of donations for June 25th. May I have a motion for approval?
I will move to accept donations for June 25th, 2024 with gratitude.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, been motion and second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next, we'll move to the consent agenda. Board members, any items from the consent agenda you'd like to pull? Hearing no requests, may I have a motion for approval?
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented on items F2 through F15.
Yeah, may I get a second?
Second.
Been motion and second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Okay. That moves us to our action agenda, and we'll start with Mr. Escobedo.
This is for the petition for readmission of an expelled student. So I move to approve petition for readmission of an expelled student, Education Code 48918, case number 202324-02, 202324-05, 202324-07, 202324-13, 202324-19, 202324-22, and 202324-28.
I second the motion.
It's been motion and second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye. Did you have a
Aye.
question?
No.
You just raised your hand. Okay. Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I didn't skip over some comments if needed. So motion passes. Now we'll move to G2. Mr. Escobedo.
I will motion to approve student discipline, Education Code 48918, case number 202324-34.
I'll second the motion.
Been motion and second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. Moving to G3, approval of transfer budget from vacant positions to exceed cost increase for Emergis healthcare staffing. And we have, okay, Mr. Shetler's coming.
Good evening, Superintendent Maldonado, President Sims Moten, and members of the board. Tonight I'm bringing you an item for your consideration. It is to extend the contract with what is now Emergis, formerly Maxim Healthcare, in the amount of $343,575 for positions that they helped to fill during this last school year. The board has already previously approved an initial contract with Maxim and then an increase mid-year, and so this is the difference in the total cost for the year to fill those positions. You'll note that the budget for this would be coming from unfilled positions, so unfilled classified and certificated salaries, and it's just a budget transfer that we are requesting your approval for, moving the money from those to the contracted services. And I welcome any questions on that.
No request to speak on this item? Okay, hearing no requests, board members, questions or comments? May I have a motion for approval, please?
I will move to approve the budget transfer from vacant positions to contracted services in order to fund an increase in the Emergis, formerly Maxim contract for the remainder of the 23-24 school year.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
Been motion and second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Motion passes. Moving to action item G4, adoption of resolution 2023-24-34, the education protection account. And we see, oh, there's Ms. Lacey coming up.
Is it on?
With the green button up?
Yeah.
Okay, you're good.
All right. Good evening, board members and superintendent. I am here this evening seeking approval of resolution or adoption of resolution 2023-24-34 and approval of the spending plan for the Education Protection Account, also referred to as EPA. The EPA was approved by California voters to provide schools additional funding, but with a few provisions. If we can actually switch over to the spending plan, I'll be talking on that document. So the provision is that the spending plan must be approved by the governing board during a public meeting, so that's why I'm here tonight. Another provision is that EPA funds cannot be used for any administrative salaries and benefits or any other administrative costs, and we'll show this on the spending plan. Each year, the spending plan is also to be published on the district's website. So, okay. So once the spending plan appears on the screen, you're going to notice that the estimated amount, so we're going to show you 3 years. So we have 2022-23, which we refer to as our unaudited actuals, 23-24, which is our current school year, and we're still estimating those numbers. And then we're bringing to you the spending plan going forward, and that's for 24-25, and that's our adopted budget. So you'll notice that these amounts are declining, and that's because this funding is based on our average daily attendance. So as our enrollment declines, so does our ADA, and so that's why you see the amount declining. Even with the decline, we still plan to use all of these funds for teachers' salaries. So that pretty much covers the spending plan, and I guess I'll now open it up to any public comments or questions from the board.
Yes, any, request to speak? Board members, any questions? I just wanted for clarification, you just said that as we look at that, this can be used for teacher salaries?
It will all be used for teacher salaries.
Oh, okay.
And that's what we've done the past 2 years and what we plan to do next year.
Okay, so the use is not administrative salary. I got it. Okay, just wanted to make sure, clarify that. Okay, may I have a motion for, thank you for the presentation. May I have a motion for approval?
I motion to approve the resolution 2023-24-3 for the Education Protection Account EPA and approval of the spending plan for the state EPA funds to be received in fiscal year 2024 to 25.
I second.
Thank you. Been motion and second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Moving to G5, adoption of Santa Barbara Unified School District 24-25 fiscal year budget. Ms. Hernandez.
Good evening. Let me get my computer open. Okay. We are here tonight to look at the proposed adopted budget for 24-25. We're going to ask you to, as we review it, that you can approve it, and we're going to certify a positive certification, which means that we can financially pay all of our bills for the 24-25 school year and the subsequent 2 years afterwards. Well, clicker. Oh, too far. You have seen this before. This is just kind of our financial cycle of life here. It shows you up there. We are here. That's in June. We are approving the adopted budget for the next school year, and we also approved the LCAP at the same meeting. Mr. Venz will be reviewing the LCAP with you. So when we talk about the budget, you all would have received this very large packet. This is what goes to the county and then goes on to the state. In this packet is not just our regular general fund, but all of the funds that we manage here at Santa Barbara Unified. What we usually talk about is the general fund, and that's the Fund 1. And when people say our budget, most people are thinking of that budget, the general fund. And that's our largest budget. And in it, it's all of the budgets that we manage at the school sites and at the district office, our department budgets, our school site budgets. I want to say there's about 30 budgets in there that all work up into one large general fund. The general fund is also kind of a two-sided budget. It's an unrestricted budget and a restricted budget. When we talk about restricted, what that means is we receive money that is specifically for certain things, and we can't use money that's given to us for the restricted programs and those kinds of things for anything other than that. So that's why it's restricted. So we're going to be looking at this budget tonight. And in the process, I'd like to kind of hopefully answer some of the questions that we have heard during the hearing that we had and some questions that we received afterwards. So we'll kind of go over some of those as well. So here we are. For this budget, we have projected staff levels of 2425, of the certificated non-management 835, classified non-management 720, and management 88, for a total of 1,643 staff members. What's not included in those numbers are our hourly folks, our subs, and our walk-on coaches, but that's really the majority of our budget. What we are also looking at is our projected student enrollment, and we're looking at 11,946, which is down 255 students from last year. Now we know that from now until the start of the school year, there will be more students that will probably come along and will enroll. And we also know that there's some years where we will get newcomers that show up throughout the year, but historically, that's been about a total of 50 students. So we are probably going to have to come to the realization that we are probably down about 200 students from last year. In the state of California, we see a lot of school districts that are in decline, and we are also seeing that here. But as we decline in our enrollment, we also need to look at our staffing and make sure we're not overstaffing and that we're not we kind of need to look at all of our budgets in the amount of students that we're serving. Oh, I'm going to let Lacey do this one.
All right, here we have kind of a little chart of our total revenue. Our revenue can be broken up into 4 different what we call funding sources. We have federal, state, local, and property taxes. You can see that property taxes make up the majority of the revenue that the school district receives. And those property taxes, that revenue lives on the unrestricted side of the budget, and that Kim was kind of talking about. We have the restricted and the unrestricted. Those property taxes are on the unrestricted side. The majority of our federal funding is on the restricted side. So we get state grants, we get money for various programs that all kind of live on the restricted side of the budget. Currently we have about 35 different grants and resources that make up the restricted side of the budget. And a lot of that money lives in the federal and the state funding buckets. We'll go on to the next slide. So this slide shows our unrestricted and restricted general fund expenditures for the General Fund 01. As you can see, salaries and benefits make up the majority of our budget. On the unrestricted side of the budget, that percentage is 83.8%. We also have estimated $11 million for books and supplies. This includes textbooks, classroom supplies, custodial supplies. The next category is going to be services and other operating expenditures, and that's at $25 million. Within this category, some of the bigger items are our utilities. That's coming in at about $4 million for next year, and that includes all the gas, the electricity, and water, sewer. We also have included in that category our bus transportation for students, and also what we contribute to athletics. And the final category is our capital plus other outgo and transfers. So capital outlay is equipment that we purchase that's generally greater than $5,000 and is going to last multiple years. That gets coded to this category, as well as any building improvements that we make out of the general fund. Also in this area, we have transfers that are being made to underfunded programs such as child development and the cafeteria or nutrition services. Right, this pie chart just shows the breakdown of just the unrestricted general fund expenditures, and it shows how we come to that 83.8%. And you can see that this, at the bottom, there's a note that says this does not include any contributions and transfers.
Let me get caught up. Okay, so what is included in our budget? As we go through this, I'm going to be answering some of the questions too that we have received. Okay. So one of the questions that came out from public comment was class size reduction. So we had a question about why it looks like the amount of teachers that we have declines in the 25-26 school year. And the reason is we currently have a bridge contract, a side letter for next year, for 24-25, in order to keep the class size reduction teachers that we have had during the COVID period where we reduced the class sizes. And we currently have a tentative agreement with Santa Barbara Teachers Association, SBTA, but that has not been ratified or approved yet, so we can't include it in our budget. So as we're talking about these things, understand that those things that we've already have tentative agreements about and settlements, we can't include them in our budget yet. So that's the answer to that question. But so in 24-25 is the only year that we do have the $6.2 million for the additional 50-plus teachers. Another question that we had related to the classroom compensation, the CEA, and this is the amount, the percentage of the expenditures that are paid towards, just directly towards those teachers that are in the classrooms and the paraeducators. So we are estimating for the adopted budget that percentage will be 55.97%, which equates to $116.9 million. This is over and above the requirement that we need to maintain. And this is before the settlements that we're talking about, before the salary increases. So that's an answer to one of the questions. Lacey had mentioned that salaries and benefits are 83% of our unrestricted budget. That equates to $127.8 million. That is only of the unrestricted side of the budget. The two CEA and the salary and benefits, they're two different calculations, so you can't do a one-for-one on that. The CEA requirement that the state, the calculation that they do is a little bit different than just a straight percentage. So we are showing a decrease in revenue, and this is a little bit of a misnomer, and the decrease is we have had just generally, historically, over the last several years, our revenue that has come in from property taxes, our local property taxes, is what mostly funds our school district. And that has been typically between 4 and 5%. But as we've talked about before, the tax assessor has told us that for next year we should be using 3.75% because basically the property tax revenue has kind of flatlined a little bit. It's not increasing as much as it has. What are some of the reasons for that? Partially it's because interest rates have been high, which means that it's very costly for people to get loans to buy homes. So we see the property taxes increase when people sell their homes and someone else buys them at the higher rate, and that's what causes the increase. So we're not seeing as many sales as we had previously. That's one of the reasons why the property tax level is a little flatter than it has been. One of the questions that we had received was the commenter thought that the difference between the 5% that we had been projecting for 24-25 and the 3.75% that we're now projecting would only be about $1 million decrease. And that is inaccurate. The decrease is more like $2.3 million for 1 year. And so we are, in our budget, we are assuming that 3.75 is going to be carried out. So that would be 2.2 1 year and another 2.2 the next year. We're looking at over $4 million, maybe $5 million decrease. The other thing that is impacting our revenue is the state's economic projections of the COLA. So the COLA for LCFF districts is going to be 1.07% next year. And the way that that affects us is we do have some programs that receive that COLA, and one of them is special education. So as we know our special education costs are rising, we know that next year we can only expect to have only a 1.07% increase. So when we're kind of thinking about COLA, for us, our COLA in general is our property tax increases. So that's, for Santa Barbara Unified, our COLA is that 3.75%. What we also know is the Consumer Price Index, the CPI right now, is running at 3.4%. So that's the cost of goods. The cost of goods are increasing at this point at almost very, very close to what our cost of living is increasing. So we know it's not going to be a lot more money that we're receiving, and we know that our costs are going up. Now let's talk about expenditures that are changing in our budget. So when we created these budgets, what we tried to do is for all of the departments and the school sites, we tried to say, we would like you to cut your supplies by 15%, and we would like everybody to cut their costs in contracts and services by 20%. And we basically started there and said, we're going to go ahead and take those cuts, and this is how much your budget is going to be. What we have seen, though, is there are some supplies that we absolutely have to have that we can't cut, and those costs next year and this year we're seeing are going up. So in the net increase, the net decrease from last year to the 24-25 is really at this point only 8.6%. We had a harder time even with the contracts and services because not all of our services can be reduced. We can't just cut utilities. We can't just cut insurance, those kinds of things. And those areas are rising. We can't cut transportation for our students, and those costs are rising. So right there, I'm telling you that the transportation cost is $2 million an increase from last year to this year to the coming 24-25 school year. And if we had stayed with our previous bus company, it would have gone up by another $1 million. So it would have been $3 million every year. Our property and liability insurance has increased by $800,000, and the majority of that relates to a bill that's called the AB 218, I think. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, which is it's a requirement that allows the statute of limitations to push further out in time for sexual assault and molestation cases in schools. So because we are part of an insurance pool, we are part of CISC, any of those cases, any of those lawsuits that are happening in the state of California are affecting our rates as well. So those costs are growing and growing just because of the potential for lawsuits and for some of the lawsuits that are happening. So we're feeling that impact. And we have the re-election of 3 board seats next year. The county will require us to pay $100,000 for those, the costs for the elections. I'd say that's a one-time cost because it's just one time for next year. And we've had some internet and some other utility costs that are going up. Now I'm going to talk about the contribution. And this is kind of one that is important because we had several questions on it, so I want to spend a little extra time on the contribution. So we are seeing an increase of $3 million to our contribution to special education. Remember I said just a little bit ago we're only seeing a 1% COLA increase, so our costs are rising significantly and the revenue is not coming in very strongly there. And so the total cost of contribution of underfunded programs is $34.5 million. Let me explain what a contribution means. When we have programs that we are mandated to do that are on the restricted side of the budget, we are required to do them, and we always want to do them well. An example is special education. Special education has never been fully funded. There is not a single district in the state of California that is fully funded for special education. So what happens is we don't receive enough money from the federal government or from the state or both to actually provide this program that we're mandated to provide. So what we need to do then is, even though that program lives on the restricted side of the budget, we need to go into the unrestricted side of the budget and scoop out enough contribution in order to make that program whole, in order to put enough money there so that it's whole. Some people call that encroachment, because you're encroaching on the unrestricted side to pay for the program. So that's what contribution is. And we had a couple questions about it, and we had some questions of fact find about it. Because if you are looking only at the unrestricted side of the budget, and the unrestricted side again is remember where our property taxes live, where our reserves live, where we have money to pay salary increases lives. So if you're looking at the unrestricted side of the budget and you are not considering that scoop out that we just did to fill those unfunded programs on the restricted side, which is $34.5 million, if you're not including that in your numbers, you're going to assume that there is more money available on the unrestricted side to pay for salaries. There's a disconnect there. And that is what we're seeing has happened. And so we have to pay for our special education. We have to pay for those programs. So it's completely inaccurate to say that we don't. So I just wanted to make that really clear, that that's what contributions are and why we always have to account for them when we consider salary increases. Lacey?
Let me get my notes. So here we have our adopted budget for our multi-year projection. So this is our simplified version of the multi-year projection. In the narrative, you'll find more detailed multi-year projections. There's an expanded version on page 16, and then an even more detailed version which is sent to the county and the state. That starts on page 130. So this MYP contains estimated actuals, which is the first column, plus the projected budget for the next 3 years. The MYP starts with our General Fund 01, which we've been talking about this evening. You can see there on row 3, that's our total revenue, and we're increasing that revenue by the estimated property tax growth. You'll see for 24-25, we're at a 3.57. That's because we're removing prior year property tax revenue that we had received in the current year. So each year we receive prior year, and sometimes it can go either way. They can say we paid you too much the year before, we're going to take property taxes from you, or they can say we didn't pay you enough, they'll give us extra. But when we're doing our multi-year projection, we take that dollar out because it's too volatile to really know what it's going to be. So that's kind of why you're seeing the 3.57 instead of the 3.75. That wasn't a typo. And then we have our total expenditures. The total expenditures include a 1.5% increase for step and column movement, and also any corresponding benefits that go along with that. We did not include any other salary increases since nothing has been approved by the board. We also did some other minor increases. We increased transportation by the projected CPI. We've also noticed that our health insurance generally increases year over year, so those type of increases have all been included in the multi-year projection. You'll see on row 5, that takes us to our net income loss, so that's our revenue minus our expenditures. When it is in red with the brackets, that's a negative, so that means our expenditures are greater than our revenue. We're projecting that for the current year plus the next 2 budget years. And then finally, in that third year, we finally have revenue that's exceeding our expenditures, and that's due to that property tax growth. All of this takes us to our general fund ending balance. So you get there by taking the beginning fund balance less that net income loss, and that gives us our ending fund balance. In that ending fund balance, that is made up of restricted and unrestricted balances. So on the restricted side, if you look in the narrative on, let's see, page 39, that'll give you the list of all the grants and programs that make up that restricted budget dollar amount. So again, that money can only be used on those programs. Within the unrestricted side of the budget, that's where we keep our reserve for economic uncertainties. So the state recommends that we have at least 3% set aside, and we are meeting that each year. If we add in the Special Reserve Fund 17 at the bottom, that's like our savings account. You add those dollars in, then our percentages go up even higher. We do have a board policy that states that we should be maintaining a 10% reserve for economic uncertainty. So once we add in the savings account, you can see that those are currently being met. And we'll go into more detail about what's to come.
So now we're going to talk about what is not in the budget, and we've sort of hinted about it and actually said it out loud. The tentative agreements with the SBTA are not included in the budget because they have not been ratified by their union and haven't been approved by you yet. But this is what we're looking at in the tentative agreement. Health and welfare increases, where the district is going to increase the payment, the employer payment, up to 75% of the premium, which is a $3.6 million increase. Salaries and wages increases 10% in 24-25, 3% in 25-26, and an additional 2% mid-year in 25-26. For SBTA, that investment would be $14 million. And we're adding a new cost of a step 23, which the math looks like it's going to be about $730,000. What we also wanted to show here is just historically what the raises have been since 14-15 in the district. So you can see where we've come and what a really great investment we're making in 24-25 and 25-26. We're also, what these percentages ongoing salary percentages don't include is the additional amounts that we paid in bonuses during the 22 to 24 school years of $4,250 per employee. I just wanted to show what just the salary increases look like, because we did get a couple questions that were, where's my question? Oh, we've just had questions about what each group would be receiving with these percentage increases. So that's the two unions and the management, what that would be for the 10%, the 3%, and the 2%. Now, when we put it all together, the tentative agreements are included here just so you can kind of see what it will look like. And I just kind of want to focus your attention to two places. The red, of course, is the deficit spending. So what's happening is, if we're only receiving 3.75% in revenue and we're increasing salaries by 10%, we're going to, and as we know, 83% of our budget is salaries, we're going to see that red go up. So we're spending more than we're receiving. So where is that money coming from? It's coming from our reserves. You can see how the reserves are going down to more like a little bit over 5% in those 2 years. And then it goes back up to 8.3% in the 26-27 year. And I did have a question as to why that happened. It's because we don't have the salary increases in that year. So we have salary increases just for the 2 years, 24-25 and 25-26. So I think this is a really good picture of how very dedicated this board is to try to really increase the salaries and the benefits for our staff. So our budget is based on assumptions, and it's based on lots of moving parts and 30 or so budgets beneath it, all combined together, and we're all part of it. All of us are managing all of the budgets that equate to the one general fund. And we're all going to be watching very carefully, and because we want to make sure that we don't go below the 5%. We were hoping to go more above it as we move along. We'll probably have to look at cuts. We'll probably have to look at how we can tighten our belt. We are probably going to have to reimagine how we do business around here. But I want to tell you that Santa Barbara Unified has a AA1 rating, credit rating, and we got that because we are very strong fiscal managers. We have a good reputation. We manage our budgets well. So I'm not concerned. I do believe that we can all really do well with our budgets and do what you need us to do to educate our students. And that's it.
Thank you for your presentation. Any requests to speak on this item? Okay. Board members, comments, questions? Don't be shy. Ms. Bill.
Okay. I'm always trying to understand the budget, so forgive me for asking some very specific questions. I was looking at the unrestricted expenditures for 2024, 2025. I was looking at capital outlay, and you explained that term that it could be equipment and building stuff, not necessarily buildings, but things related to buildings. I saw that the capital outlay increased by 1.2 million from this year to next, but then in the restricted funds, it actually decreased by a similar amount. Are those related, or do we have this big equipment expense that we're having to cover from this year to next?
So a lot of the capital outlay that's on the restricted side comes from our CTE programs and grants. And a lot of those budgets haven't been fully developed yet. The schools are given their allocations this time of year, but with school ending and then summer, we generally don't fully budget those out until the school year actually gets up and going. So a lot of those funds we've kind of put a placeholder in instructional supplies until the programs decide if they will be purchasing supplies this year, if they will be purchasing capital. It's going to vary every year based on the program's needs.
Okay, so that explains why in the restricted funds the number is lower.
Yes.
Now, why in the unrestricted is it going up so
Okay.
significantly?
So this is going to get very complicated. It's very accountant-y. So the way that we have to account for leases is we have to basically record the lease as a whole, and that goes into the capital outlay. So I think it was a board meeting in May, there was an approval for iPad leases. So in the eyes of accounting and the policies that we have to follow, they view that as capital because the lease amount is so large. So we record the total lease there, so that's the 1.2, I believe. And but then we also offset that by recording revenue, which is found at the kind of the bottom of, if you're looking at the SACS forms, it's proceeds from leases. So we add the revenue, we add the expenditures, it nets to zero. The only thing that really impacts the budget each year when we are doing the leases is the additional lease payments.
Okay.
So you would have seen that, well, some lease payments fall off and then we add some on. It's always kind of changing with the lease payments.
Okay, so I'm seeing obviously just one side of the picture there. So thank you for
Yes.
that explanation. That helps me understand. I was wondering, wow, I wonder what we're getting for 1.2 million.
Yeah. You're getting Apple devices.
Yes. Another question. I know that Ms. Hernandez talked about the special education cost, and I guess I have sort of general questions, and really it's not so specific to our district, but one is if you are a state aid district and your special education costs are going up, is that usually somehow covered by the government because they have a limited pool of money, and we're community funded, so we can kind of grab from our unrestricted fund. So that was just kind of like, how do they deal with this? And then the second part of the question is this a growing issue for our budget? Is special education rising in terms of the percentage of our budget? Is this something that we have to grapple with in the next unlimited amount of years?
You've asked the right person. I know all the answers to that.
Oh, good.
So I used to work at SELPA. So special ed has never been fully funded. So it's a mandated program by the federal government. At one point, the federal government was said that they were going to pay 40% of special education, and then the states would pay the rest. At one point, the federal government part was like 7%. I mean, it's really, really underfunded. So all school districts, every single one, has this same issue where they need to contribute from the general fund to pay for special education. It's kind of the state doesn't fully pay for it because I think their thought process is, well, if the federal government's not going to pay for it, we're not going to pay for it. So it's all one of these continuing problems. And the costs do continue to rise significantly. And a lot of times, if you are a really good school district who is really managing special education well, families will move into the area because they want the special ed program. So a lot of times we'll see growth in those areas if we're doing things really well. So that's just kind of one of the answers to that question. Everybody contributes. Even the LCFF districts, they all contribute towards special education. And what was your other part?
Is that percentage starting to increase? Like,
okay.
You pointed out in your presentation that this was actually not realized during fact-finding, how much our contribution to special education is. And I'm just, this is an ongoing thing with our budget. Salaries do need to go up, the cost of living goes up. Do we see the special education funding continuing to be a big contribution from our general fund? Has it been growing every year?
Yes, it's been growing every year. And to be clear, it was something that we always understood about the contribution. It was just others who didn't understand when they were calculating the salary, what was available for salaries. It is growing, but we have been very fortunate that in the past 4 or 5 years that the state has been contributing more money towards special education, so that has kind of helped to stabilize that. But we really rely on the COLA. And so in the last, couple years, was it last year the COLA was 8.2, was it this year? The current year, the COLA was 8.22%. That was great for our special education because that was extra money to help pay for that. So anytime that the COLA does a nosedive for LCFF, that's where we feel it is in special education. And because we have teachers and other staff that are providing services in special education, and they are also they will receive the salary increases, that's going to grow the cost of the program, which will mean we'll need to be contributing more for those increases.
Okay, thank you. And then I know that we do have to make cuts, and this is kind of a tough question. As I had noticed that travel and conferences is being decreased by 40%. I'm assuming that the conferences that our students and staff go to, the travel, the conferences, are important. How is this going to be managed? This 40% decrease, that's very significant.
So we allowed the owners of those budgets, whether it be the department or the school sites, to determine where they wanted to take the cuts for those things. And so in many cases, the travel is one of the areas that is kind of the easiest to cut, really. And because there are some places where we can see things, do webinars online and do conferences online, that may ease some of that, the gap. But we do have other programs that are definitely going to be traveling. Like we have some programs that it's a requirement of the program for the teachers to travel or the teachers to take the students. So those programs we would continue to encourage, and some of those programs are built into LCAP, or they're part of other funding like AVID, or those kinds of funding. So those programs definitely would continue to travel.
I am going to ask Dr. Sheffield if you'd care to add a little bit of how you'll manage some of this. I think your question was really about how will we implement a process for ensuring that we're cutting that, if I understood?
Yeah, what is the process going to be? I mean, it sounds like some of it is school site, some of it is program-based, so like we have an overarching program that covers all the schools, that whoever's managing that will make those decisions. Yeah. I'm just curious, we have so much, that is actually a fairly significant part of our budget. So
Yes.
If you slash up by 40%, who decides what, and that sort of thing, yeah.
So we do have I'll start here, and then I'll have Dr. Sheffield finish up. We do have a process for travel approval that we have implemented in the last couple of years that goes through several steps. Most of the school site travel ends up through Dr. Sheffield. She is the final approver for those travel requests that come from the school site. So I'll have her explain some of that. And then I know that with our cabinet, and as we get to launch the 24-25 school year in July, when we bring all leadership together, we will be announcing the need to reduce our travel and ensure that it's only necessary. So we can put a memo in writing similar to the memo you saw for the 3 Rs. We'll put some kind of guidance together for leaders to know that we will only be approving necessary travel. But I'd like to have Dr. Sheffield talk a little bit about your process and your communication with principals, athletic directors, and everybody else that does travel.
So both travel for staff as well as travel for students comes through my office. So those two different items. The requests come to the principals first, and then once the principal approves, and they approve based on a process we have developed. We have made a flow chart in which they need to follow specific guidelines and answer specific questions as far as the purpose of the program, where are they going, and how is the program going to be funded. In particular, let's just take specifically AVID. Our AVID teachers do travel both for staff as well as for students. So, for example, our AVID teachers do have to, as a mandate, participate in the AVID Summer Institute. And so that is something that we do cover, and we plan for that in the beginning of the year for the AVID Summer Institute. Another part of the program for AVID is for our student travel to colleges, because we are representing the majority of students that are first-generation graduates, and so we expose them to colleges and universities. And there are trips that our high schools take every year in regards to traveling up north or down south to visit colleges. But for both of those items, they do have to follow the specific travel guidelines. They should be submitting in time in order for us to actually review what are they doing, the purpose, make sure they have enough chaperones. Other programs we work with is our athletics. And there are things that are mandated for athletics depending upon if they're playing in their competition as a part of the CIF. Things that we can put a pause on can be some of the voluntary tournaments that they participate in. There are times when our staff, our school sites will fundraise. So our athletic programs do have events in which they're doing currently right now this summer to fundraise to pay for some of their tournaments. So that is something that we would look at. In addition to participating in the tournaments, we need to also consider bus travel, those expenses. But we do take them through that process, really identifying what it is, where they're going, and the funding source. Anything that is to be paid by the school site funds specifically, or for using district funds, those are mandated programs that we pay for. Another one that is usually mandated or has that you'll see coming through are for our academies. Our college and career academies, the CTE programs that we have in place. They do have travel. They do have different funding sources and grants that can pay for the travel there.
I think my concern, or I know that my concern, is that 40% is a big decrease. And as everybody is aware, every meeting we approve funding for all sorts of things, including travel. And as you said, some of it is mandated. Obviously, we would cover that. Some of that is more voluntary. And I just want to know that the messaging is going to go out, that there will be this level of scrutiny that has not been there before. And mainly, I think the purpose of that is as you said, some of the trips are community funded. And I believe that information needs to be out there, that some of the travel, some of the conferences are going to be optional. It's so great when our students go and they speak and they do media conferences and they sing and they go here or there. I think that's great for the students. I would not like to see that at the last minute they're like, oh, we're not going to get funding, we can't go to this. But to hear that they might have to raise some of the funding for some of the not so mandatory events if they want to attend. So how do we talk to them about that early on before the school year starts or close to the start of the school year, so that they can continue to participate in things, and the community that supports our district so well can also get involved in supporting these students.
Definitely. And we look at what they're taking our students to, even those that do fundraise, for making sure that our programs provide equitable opportunities for all students. And so those are questions that do come up. Those are things that I discuss with Dr. Maldonado, making sure that all students have opportunities.
I agree with that. I mean, I guess I'm just saying, are we going to look at what we funded this year and then just sort of give an advance to the people who are organizing this, that the funding may be reduced for this or it may be more difficult, so that they have as big an on-ramp to try to fundraise or to make other decisions, that sort of thing. Yeah, thanks.
And, in the policy documents that we shared for the anti-racism, we have a couple of resolutions that have been passed by this board around equitable funding and equitable opportunities. So you bring up an excellent point. We know that there are communities that could easily say, oh, well, you don't have money, we'll pay for it. And so we will have to come to the board at some point and say, make sure that you're supporting us and saying, we are not going to allow this kind of travel this year. A community could raise money for a trip. We're still liable. We still have to pay in kind. You could call it in kind. Insurance coverage, liability, transportation, teacher salaries. So just raising money for kids to go somewhere is not like the whole picture. So what I hear you asking is, can we lay down some guidelines about ensuring equitable travel and looking at that which might be just funded by some community that will create that inequity. So I think you bring up an excellent point that we will now take back and talk about in cabinet and look for how we'll provide greater guidance, and we'll share that with you guys in a memo.
Can I just add to that point too? We started to look at that really about 2 years ago with regards to the travel. So we're just expanding that with this purview, because we started to already look at how many trips that admin was taking, staff was taking, students were taking, and so thus that more expanded report that comes to the board. So maybe this is just adding on to that already. And I would assume that as you get to the 40%, it got to that way in terms of based on a review at the site to saying we can make these, because we're saying overall we need to have some reductions. And so how we got to the overall 40% included conversation with the site leaders. This is what we're going to do and how we're going to do that to that point. So we always start to look at that, but to the point of we got to still make sure that we do have communities that can raise money within the site and be able to do that. So I can appreciate expanding that policy that we already started to look at travel, much more intentionally. Do we need to do it, and how many do we need to take? So we can just expand on that policy that we already started to look at now, probably about 2 years ago, because actually post-COVID, because it went up really high because no one was traveling, and so we saw this great, this increase in spike in those costs, and now you're seeing it come a little bit more level. But that, and the fact that there was also a policy looking at what is necessary travel versus.
And we've begun having conversations with our school leaders already, and so we will expand those conversations a little bit more.
Thank you. I appreciate the explanation.
Yeah, before I get to my questions or my comments, I wanted to ask Dr. Beal if I also caught, and I want to elevate a point that you might have been making, is to over-communicate about these cuts that are coming so that people aren't shocked when they come next year. They've had this trip the last couple of years and they expect to do it again this upcoming school year. And then all of a sudden they realize, oh, there's the funding's not there. Is that right?
Yes, as much communication, because when we have any sort of cut, we can't talk enough or soon enough or enough about what the implication of that is on the community and jobs and salaries and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
In my previous district, we used to call it a travel freeze. And that indicates for a period of time we will freeze travel, and then we could bring it back later. So that'll be some of the language we'll be looking at. Thank you.
Okay. All right, before I get into my questions, Ms. Hernandez and Lacey and the rest of the team, I just wanted to say thank you. The last 6 to 9 months, we have really been taking a look at the budget and learning a lot about the budget, and we had our numbers double and triple checked over the last few months, and I think for myself, my confidence in your team and in you, and I think going through the fact-finding process, it has only grown. And so I just wanted to say thank you for all of your hard work and your team's hard work, and if you could relay that to them, that would be greatly appreciated.
There we go. Thank you. Very kind. Did you hear that, Lacey?
I know it's not easy. Well, and also these budgets are not the most digestible for lay people like myself, but I've learned a lot, and I think we've all learned a lot, especially going through the fact-finding process. And one of my requests would be that we do a budget session, that a session solely dedicated to studying the budget, about what we learned and some of the things that we learned that other people were making different assumptions, right?
Yeah.
And you did some of that tonight, so I really appreciate you elevating the point about special education and the contributions. I think that was really important. But all of what we learned, I think it would be really helpful, not only for education purposes, but also as we're looking forward and we're going to have to reassess parts of the budget. And as you said, reimagine some of the stuff that we do. I think it would be good if we all started with the same information, and a budget session, I think, would be a really good space for that. Okay, now on to my questions. So, so one of the things that really jumped out at me, and you brought it up in your presentation, but it wasn't only that our insurance rates increased, it was by how much they increased.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, and it's hard, you're speculating and making assumptions as well, but have you heard anything? I'm sure you've been in sessions about these increases, or you've received some sort of information. Should we assume that they are going to continue to increase year after year? I hope not as dramatically as this first increase.
Right. All the information that I've seen is most of the increases are due to that sexual assault and molestation cases. One of the good things is we are also contributing to a fund that's called SELF. I don't remember what it stands for exactly, but where we are actually contributing to a fund that will help build up a reserve kind of there that is also funded by a lot of other school districts to help cover any of those cases if those things should happen. But yeah, it's kind of unclear as to how far this will go. I'm hoping that at some point it'll settle down, but I don't have good clear answers on that.
Okay, thank you. The other cost that I know that has risen quite a bit over the last couple of years, and I think even going into next year, are energy costs, right? Particularly, I think it's natural gas has increased. Are we going to see? We have some solar arrays and battery storage that are currently not online, but they will be online in the near future.
Right.
Will that help offset some of those increases?
Yes, I believe so. I don't know if Lacey, do you have anything you want to add to that or not?
I can add. So for the upcoming year, I actually reduced the natural gas. We saw this year that the cost had come down compared to the year before when we had seen like extreme costs. So our natural gas did go down, but unfortunately our electricity's been going up. So since we haven't been able to get the solar panels up as planned, we're kind of paying more than we thought we were. So we kind of almost netted with the decrease and then the increase. I tried to keep it kind of so that there wasn't a big change. But again, it's all assumptions, and we'll have to see how our winter goes. If it's more mild, then our natural gas costs will probably come in relatively low again. But I think within the next couple of years, we are hoping to see those costs come down. But I haven't incorporated any of that into the multi-year projection.
And that makes sense. I think it's worth saying, I got a question in the last couple of months about why does the district always budget more conservatively than when it actually plays out? And I don't know if you can touch on that about why that practice is the right practice for a district.
Because the other direction would be devastating, is really the answer. So we have a lot of assumptions in everything that we do, but we tend to be conservative, and you'll see budgets, most district budgets will start higher in the adopted budget than where they end up in unaudited actuals. And that's just because of all the assumptions that you make throughout the year. You assume that all of your vacancies are going to be filled. You assume that all these different things are going to happen, but you don't assume big savings that may not hit this year. And you may not assume them for next year because they're still kind of far out there. But as you get closer, right, then you can start capturing some of those savings as you get closer. But in general, good conservative budgeting is the way you want to go. You just don't want to go the other direction where you get to the end of the year and you've made bad assumptions and now you're in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. And a somewhat related question is, typically throughout the year you show us this, for me it's interesting, an interesting graph that shows cash flows. And so what happens when you don't have reserves to rely on, and why we are paying attention to Fed rates, interest rates, and the relation between those interest rates and cash flow and reserves. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So LCFF districts receive money every single month. And they're called apportionments, and they come from the state. Every single month they get roughly the same amount of money, and they can budget very well because they know how much money they're getting per month. We receive property taxes, and we only receive them 3 times a year. One is December and April, and then again in July, August timeframe. Is it July?
A little bit in June.
A little bit in June. Okay, so she's correcting me. So it's 3 times a year. We don't know what the June one is going to be yet, and we've completed almost an entire school year. So because our funding comes in these big chunks throughout the year, there may be a time, and you've seen in our cash flows before, we are required to pay payroll. And that's a certain amount every single year, every single month, and other expenditures that happen monthly. Our utilities, we have to keep the lights on, we have to do all those things. So we're paying out monthly, but we receive revenue in chunks only 3 times a year. So there's typically a time of the year, I think it's around October, where we start getting really low on the amount of money that we have to pay for payroll. And that's our most important thing, is payroll. So at any point when you can't pay payroll, that's when the state comes in and takes you over. So we have to pay payroll, and that's like number 1. So if it's looking like we start the school year and it's looking like we don't have enough reserves to cover us in that low period when we are just kind of waiting for the next chunk of revenue to come in, that's when we will need to get what's called a trans, and that's a loan. So we haven't had to get a loan in several years because our reserves were high enough to cover us. But now that we're getting down kind of lower in the reserves, we may have to get a trans again. And in doing that, that's where we look at the federal interest rates. Because if interest rates are high, then that costs the district more money to pay for that loan.
Thank you for that. I had one more question. This always happens to me. I lost it. I'll come back to me.
Okay.
Mr. Manning? Did you find it?
Before I forget, I remember now. It wasn't a question, it was a comment. So, I know. Okay, so in looking at the MYPs, and you're looking at 5% for the next 2 years, then you're looking at 8.3% for that third year out. And just let's think conservatively. Let's say that 3.75% increase on property taxes is what plays out, or somewhere around there. It could even go up a little bit. But in thinking about healthcare costs continue to rise. So up until now, we've only been paying 1% of the increase on healthcare costs, right? But now we are at that 75%, so we can assume that that's going to increase. We have these other increases. We also can assume that there's probably going to be, we're going to reopen salary negotiations in 2 years. I think when we think about the board policy of 10%, I tend to think, I don't know how realistic that is into the future. And so maybe a board discussion about that as well.
So we went from paying 40% plus any premium increases to the 75%, just to clarify that statement. But most unified school districts that are community funded keep reserves between 20 and 30%. That is the average for the 15% of community funded districts in the state. My recommendation to this board would be to continue to keep a higher than expected state reserve for the reasons that Kim and Lacey have laid out. But that's part of some of the information that we shared with the board, and that was part of the fact finding as well.
So I guess maybe I wasn't clear enough. It's more of, we have this board policy of 10%. I'm not sure when we're going to get back to 10% is what I'm saying. And so a discussion as a board is, if that's a board policy, part of our discussion, one aspect of our discussion is there needs to be a plan either to get back there or to have an understanding that we're not going to be back there for a little while, and be on the same page about that.
Now I understand. So yes, that's something that we should be talking about constantly, and that could be part of what you asked for earlier, which was the board study session on the budget.
Okay.
Mhm.
I'll echo the thanks for the incredibly hard work on complex information and helping us make it understandable. Thank you very much. A couple of things that have come up. You talked about interest for trans. Are there subsidized interests, or what is this something that would be equivalent to what's happening in the mortgage market, or something else in terms of what it would cost to borrow with trans as opposed to interfund borrowing?
Since we haven't done one in a couple of years,
Fair enough.
I don't really know. I can tell you that prior years, the interest would range anywhere from $100,000 to $300,000, just depending on the interest rate.
Yeah, it's significant. Yeah. This is just a question. You said that our enrollment would be projected to be about 11,946. I'm curious about whether we are in a point where next year there is an expanded pool by making younger children more eligible. You know what I'm saying? When we did TK, there was a point when we're getting more kids.
Mm-hmm.
Is next year one where those numbers are expanding?
I'll let Ms. Edison help us out here.
There has been an increase in the TK grade span, but it still is not a requirement, so it's still an optional year, just like kindergarten.
Okay, are we expanding it?
We have expanded classes. Yes, we have. We've added FTEs to particular sites because of enrollment, and at some sites we are in overflow, which means we're overflowing them to another school because they've met their FTEs.
And are we expanding the age range down?
We have to enrollment per ed code. Yes.
Okay. Anything more coming next year?
No, it'll be at full age span.
Okay.
For 24-25.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about complex questions coming without warning. That I should know better.
No, it's okay.
We
got a good, strong team.
The CEA expectation after this settlement, I'm assuming that if we're putting a whole lot more money on the table, that number would be going up.
We assume that it would be going up.
Okay, that's.
I'm just going to add that our total expenditures will go up at the same time that the teacher salaries are going to go up. So it's not going to be a one-for-one.
Okay.
So you're not going to see
No, it's not going to grow dramatically because expenditures go up too.
Yes.
Okay.
But we do know that the 83% is going to go to about 85.
On the salaries.
Yes.
Okay, let's see, that falls into my last statement, but the first thing I want to talk about here. The state and federal our money for special education, we were talking about the costs going up. And I know that there are certain things that when we're benefiting from property tax increases because that's the equivalent of LCFF or local revenue, is the special education funding, you talked about how important the COLA was. Is that because for special education funding at a federal level that we get that COLA, we get that money separate from our property taxes?
Correct.
Okay. All right. That
Yeah,
one's easy.
that's the state COLA that we receive.
All right. And the last are just two comments. One, I want to address the question on basic aid reserve expectations. I know one of the things that it ties very much into this funding in three hunks kind of thing. that and property tax revenue tends to trail behind what the state does. So when we see a big state COLA, we're liable to see a big property tax the next year. My point here is that our advocates in Schools for Sound Finance, basic aid advocates, have often reported that it makes sense for districts to increase their reserves by a percentage that's equivalent to or similar to what the amount over the LCFF allocation that we would get. That's why you see many times the wealthiest districts have the largest reserves, because as they get this big number, they have way more impact when it goes away because they aren't going to get protected by the state revenues. And last, I want us to think back to the chart that talked about 84% of our students that think more deeply about race and how that went up, and that now we're saying that 85% of and during that conversation, I think my colleague Mr. Escobedo made a comment. 85%, that's really good. You can't get much better than that. So now, 85% of the money we spend is on salaries. And we're talking about the importance of budget cuts, of transportation, of utilities, of all of these kind of things. But we have to keep in mind that a 40% cut in travel compared to 85% of all of our expenditures being salary, that's a big, huge hunk. That's why it's so difficult to save money and cut money in districts, in school districts and public education. 85%, 85 cents of every dollar goes to salary. And so if we wanted to save 15%, we could just cut everything but salary and have nothing. Just a point in terms of scale of numbers. When we're talking about percentages, sometimes it's not as clear a picture as it seems. Thank you.
Good point.
Ms. Munoz?
Yes, I also want to, express my appreciation for the information that you present, and how it's presented in terms of being understandable to the layperson. I had a question about transportation. Is that, with the huge jump in, with the 2 million, with that, is that expected to, is there any way to know, is that expected to hopefully stay stable or, for the next year?
We have a contract with a new bus company, the Zoom bus company, and so for the next couple of years, it's going to be stable. I think it's for 2 years. We have a 5-year contract, but for the first 2 years, it won't change. We also do receive some funding from the state for home-to-school transportation. It's obviously not going to fully cover it. And that is also kind of in arrears, so they're paying for last year's as we move forward. So at some point, as we get into this, we will be receiving a little more money from the state to help cover those increases. So we'll see that kind of stabilize.
Okay, thank you. I also, agree with Mr. Escobedo about having a board study session on the budget itself, and appreciate, the transparency with, this is what we're looking at and this is what we're going to have to do for the next few years in terms of costs and freezing certain expenditures and stuff, and also communication throughout the year. I know you're really good about that, about just communicating so that the community and the staff know what to expect. So thank you. I appreciate my colleagues' questions and such. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you. So I just appreciate this conversation. So a lot of my questions were asked. I don't have to duplicate them. So thank you for this great discussion. I first want to just recognize the work that goes into it, the complexity of this budget. I've seen it evolve really to where someone could understand it who didn't necessarily work in it every day, so I can appreciate the work having been here since 2016. There were questions like, what is a loan to fast cash flow? So, asking more more informed questions. And to that point, if we had to do that, And you mentioned earlier in the conversation with regards to our credit rating. So how does that play, or would it play in if we had to, borrow money? Or does it at all?
The credit rating does factor in, and the better credit rating we have does help.
Yeah. So just tying into, because I often get that question myself, Wendy, why do you budget so conservatively? It's for those times and those ups and downs, and at the same time, if we have a little bit more, then we can spend. But, putting that in a category, if we have extra money, we can do that. But explaining that, in terms of, because it may look, well, you have extra money, so it should go here. But explaining it's one time, and because we budgeted in the way that we were conservative to make sure that we could meet all of our bills, thus getting a positive certification. So all of those things, tend to come into play. I echo about budget study sessions. We've had those in the past, and we really worked hard to make sure that we were explaining the complexity of the budget. But the other thing I think about it, because if it's the budget study session, for those who don't understand it, we've got to figure out how do we then create the environment for shared understanding and how this budget affects me. Not me, but as an individual, because otherwise you're coming and you're talking to the board with regards to that. So how do we create and invite a shared understanding? So when we're in those times of like for instance, you talked about the special education piece. I don't think we fully understood that, but we did that, but we got it here, but not necessarily who's looking at it from a layman's turn. So how do we use that opportunity to create a shared understanding and be really informed about that? So how do we communicate that out? Maybe our students can do a campaign about come and know about the budget. I don't know. But I'm just saying that I think that's really something important. So it's not just coming as a study session to the board, but really those who may not fully understand it. So Eric, first assignment. No. So I think that's a really important piece for us to really benefit from that. And the other thing is about the special education with regards to expanding the time that you're able to come back and seek compensation for harm done through the sexual assaults and things. Is there any way to mitigate? Is there any strategies to mitigate? Is it training, of employees to mitigate the things that happen in the place? How are we doing that in light of that there's going to be potential years before we even were here, in terms of how we do that. But going forward and knowing that that's coming, how can we then be better prepared for that through our training, through all of those things, very intentional about doing it, perhaps mitigating those costs? Superintendent.
So we did introduce 2 new modules that I believe you were also asked to complete, and those will be annual.
Okay.
So we will ensure that we're annually and maybe I'll even make it like twice a year for this next year, just to make sure that it's like at the beginning of the year. And then in January, I'm looking at Mr. Vance over here, because that'll be his. When I say I mean him. Doing the modules for grooming and sexual abuse. So along with the child abuse. I think one thing we learned, just sorry to expand a little more further.
That's fine.
We've done child abuse training as a mandated reporter training every year for years in school districts, and I think there's been an assumption that we do that because children get hurt at home, and we're reporting on that. But what we're finding out is that that's not always the case, and that happens in schools. We don't like that to happen. We never want that to happen, but it does, and that's part of what this legislation is about. And some of the mindsets that we need to shift, just like with our 3R and our anti-racism work, is the fact that we also need to be caretakers of children in our school systems. And that's what that training is about, and we will continue to do that, that mandated training that actually came from legal experts who were doing these cases. They're the ones that built the training. So that's why it's built the way it is.
So I think also with that point, because this is not only a shared understanding, but a shared responsibility of how our district is. So people really going down to, we're very essential of knowing this, that when we do these things, that is a negative to our, not only to the harm that's being done to the person, but to the district. There is a cost to that. And so if there's an apathy feeling like I don't really have to do that training, there is a cost to that. And so even the trainings that we talked about today, there is a cost when we don't feel that it's important for me as an individual to participate in this and be the best that we can do to protect the district. So as we are all a part of the district, it is the individual responsibility. So it's not just the I, it's the we, the shared responsibility. So the more it's like, for instance, we can connect just what we're talking about here today. We've got a new law that's going to expand out time to be able to have, with regards to these potential lawsuits. Here's what we can do as a district, and here's how you can participate and protect those things that happen. So as we start to really move forward, really talk about the shared understanding and the shared responsibility, how that we as individuals and collectively protect the district, protect the cost. When we want to give as much as we can for salaries and making sure that our students are going and traveling, there is a cost on another side if we're not paying attention to that and realizing our responsibility for that. So I think the more that, that's again in communicating that, we even at a budget session with every turn that we can, and there could be a potential loss, then we need to make that connection as part of a presentation so people understand that. And I think that will help people come and really want to hear about the budget and how those actions, our individual actions and collective actions, impacted either positively or negatively. So did you have something else you wanted to?
Just one question.
Mm-hmm.
That was so. Just one question following a good point that you made. Do preventative measures like that decrease the cost for us? I know if it's a silly example, but if I took like a driver safety training, my car insurance is lower. Is it similar to that?
I don't know that it's necessarily like that, but if we were to have a case, then, we're fully. So an example, a kind of a slightly different example, is we're also now paying for cybersecurity. Any of these sort of insurances that we're doing to protect the district is for catastrophic incidences that will affect us and that will, could really harm our general fund budget. So we pay for these insurances to protect us for those cases. Like the cybersecurity insurance that we have, if we have ransomware like some other school districts have had and some other county offices have had, where they've been, have to pay these huge ransomwares just to get their munis back, or their financial systems back. That's where the cost savings is just really kind of like your car. You're paying to protect yourself in the case that there is some sort of an accident. And it's the same thing for the school district. These things are to protect us in the case that anything happens, and we hope that none of it does, but if it does, it's there for us.
Thank you.
Hearing no additional questions and or comments, may I have a motion for approval?
I move for the adoption of the SBUSD 24-25 fiscal year budget.
I second the motion.
Okay, been motion and second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for a great presentation. And I'm just going to do some agenda management so that we're putting things together that's tied up. So I want to move to item 9 so that it's kind of tied to this item, and then we'll go back in our order from there. Board members, remember to take self-care as we're moving through this evening.
All right, good evening again. And before I start, I just want to say, Anastasia, thank you so much for all of your participation and being on the school board. And also, I was thinking about you sitting here during this time, listening to all of this, and we really appreciate not only your patience to live and learn and experience all this, but also to bring your insight to us. So thank you. And again, we look forward to having Eric join us. I'm going to really just cut this straightforward because we've been taking this to you on and on. So we've met with groups over 20 times. And so tonight I bring to you the final version of our LCAP. Just want to bring up one particular note, and that is that the LCAP, it's actually put into an order that's required by the California Department of Ed. So that's why you see the budget document first, and you'll have the LCAP update from the past LCAP, And then the document itself is in the middle. It has our insignia. Anyway, it's been all right. Logo. Thank you. And then from that point on, it's budget sheets and instructions. So with that said, I'm just going to open it up for public comment and questions.
I don't see any requests to speak on this item. Board members' comments or questions? Probably the two that have the questions have stepped away, so just hold on for a minute. So yeah, is there anything you might want to add while the music is playing while they're coming back? So you could be the music playing.
Sing a song for you. Let's see here. A little bass. I could sense we did hear Gabe did ask a question offline when he came in and asked if we were able to incorporate any of the recommendations from the DEMLAC into the LCAP, and we did, because we did go in and we added more funding for perfect timing, Gabe. So we did add more funding specifically to make sure that we had childcare, and then also making sure that they're getting for dinners or whatever it is in terms of the working dinner itself. So things like that. So with that being said, that's one additional note.
You want to add to it? Okay. Any comments or questions for the LCAP that you might think about? Mr. Banny?
I'll just say, from past experience with the complexity and the length of process and the detail of it, that this is exceptional work. It's an important document if we make it an important document, and I think we're doing that. So thank you for the guidance and making this work. They say that if you want to understand the strategic direction of a district, look at their budget, look at their LCAP. Thanks.
Okay, and I just want to acknowledge Dr. Bill's participation in that, very dedicated to that. So I know that her input is all there and her footprint is in here in terms of the questions and the level of questions that she's asking. And again, I don't want to approve this document without my board members here. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take a 10-minute break.
I'm going to put the vote on pause and go to the next one. It'll be the HR.
No, we don't. I requested that. I just know that they're going to have those same questions.
10-minute break is fine.
Okay.
Well, there's Dr. Bill.
There's Rose has left me too. Okay.
Sorry.
I got this. So we're on the LCAP, and so I just want to make sure if you had any questions or comments that you had a chance to express those.
I've looked at the LCAP quite a bit, so I have no new questions, not tonight.
And I said as much. I just want to make sure, acknowledging your dedication and footprint on that. Mr. Escobedo.
Yeah, just one, I'm looking forward to learning more about those metrics in the future for LCAP. And two, Mr. Vance, I've told you before, I'll tell you again, I've received so much positive feedback from people that have been a part of previous LCAP processes about the way that you've led it, your responsiveness to questions, your openness about providing space for people during the meetings, the LCAP meetings, and the fact that it really felt like an exchange and that you listened, and everyone else that was involved in the LCAP process. And I just wanted to say thank you for your leadership, and you did an amazing job. Thank you.
Thank you. There are actual elements from the feedback that we got in, we were able to put it into the LCAP. So as you could see it and compare it to the old one, you'll see those elements. So thank you.
Okay, I think we've stretched out the elevator music as much as we can. So I just hearing recommendations. So if Mr. Vance, if you can just hold on for a second, I'm going to pause it until Ms. Munoz comes back in. Ms. Peak, so if you can just, I'll hold the vote for a minute until they come in. Ms. Peak, if you can come and start your presentation really quickly, and Ms. Munoz could join us.
Good evening, Board President Sims Moten, Board of Education, and Dr. Maldonado. The item that I'm presenting tonight is the request of approval for Human Resources recommendations. The form we have in front of you shows basically all the things that impact our employees when they are hired, if they resign, they receive a stipend for something. All of those things are reflected here in front of you. Right now, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of appointments, but that will start to change as we enter into a more busy hiring season for both classified and certificated. And I am happy to answer any questions you might have regarding the report.
Any requests to speak on this item? Probably not. So just going to hold it for a minute here. Give Ms. Munis. Sure, I was good. Yep.
I do want to recognize that on this, sadly, in this HR report, we are losing Brenda Aguilar. She will be leaving Santa Barbara on to new chapters in her life, and she has been an incredible asset to our superintendent's office. I know Sandra is the saddest, probably. But we really want to thank you, Brenda. You are such an amazing assistant. You've learned so quickly to the work of our office, which is, is a little bit all over the place. And we want to wish you an amazing new journey. And of course, if you come back, you'll always have a job in Santa Barbara Unified. And we will really, really miss you. So thank you for all your service.
Who's going to bug me for my lunch order? Wendy, it's like 1:59. Girl, do you want to eat or not? So just more than that. Just appreciate just when you first came on, just the amount of, like, as superintendent just said, how quickly you learned and adjusted. And Sandra was smiling even wider. It's like, yeah, I got somebody some help. So also just want to again extend the appreciation as well, how you've supported the board and wrangled us where we needed to be. So and your patience with us. So thank you so much. I think we can pull this vote without Ms. Munoz. She's coming later. So with that, may I have a motion for approval?
I will
make a motion. Go ahead.
Move to approve the human resources recommendations.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, been motion and second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
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 Great. Just in good timing. Thank you for the report. Mr. Vance. So we'll move back to G9, and did you have any additional questions for the LCAP? Okay. We weren't going to ask them any, right? Okay. With that, may I have a motion for approval?
I move to approve the 24-25 Santa Barbara USD Local Control Accountability Plan.
I second the motion.
Okay. Been motion and second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vance, for the presentation. Okay. We're going to move to approval of the Teach Town curriculum. Oh, there, she's on the way. Hello. Okay.
Good evening, Board President Sims Moten, Superintendent Maldonado, Board Trustees, Cabinet, and District staff. I'm here to provide a brief presentation as part of the request to approve the Teach Town adoption and purchase in order to meet the state requirements of the alternate path to a high school diploma. All right. So this is a timeline of since I was last here. On Here we go. Sorry, that slide wasn't supposed to be in the presentation, but let me just go back to it. That was just what I presented last time I was here, just the overview of the pilot and whatnot that we discussed last time in May. Moving here, we got our Teach Town pilot survey feedback. We came to the board on the 28th to open the window for public viewing. The window was open and closed on 6/24. Motion to the board today to approve the adoption and purchase of the Teach Town curriculum and instructional materials. And then you can see we have professional development plan for our ESN high school teachers on 9/14, 10/24, and 3/3, in addition to individual coaching that the purchase of this curriculum will provide as part of our package. This is a survey. I did show this last time I was here. We had about 60% of our ESN high school teachers complete this survey when I was here last. I just wanted to update the board. You can see here you can't see here, 100% of our teachers have participated in the survey since I last came, and the teachers that piloted the program were strongly agree. The majority of the others were neutral, and the reason why they were neutral after follow-up was because they hadn't had the opportunity to implement the curriculum. So we're hoping that next school year we can come back in May or June and present to you with teachers and students and families the outcomes of our first year of the implementation of the curriculum. And our recommendation is to approve the adoption and purchase of the Encore TeachTown curriculum and instructional materials for the 24-25 school year for high school and post-secondary extension support needs students. The fiscal impact will be $121,160.29, and that will be coming out of our LCAP Goal 4 funding for 23-24. Any questions?
Seeing no request to speak, board members, any comments or questions? Hearing none, may I have a motion? Thank you for the presentation. May I have a motion for approval?
I make a motion to approve the TeachTown curriculum for the 24-25 school year.
Second.
Been motion and second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. And next we'll move to item G8, our final action item of the evening, approval of ongoing contracts for fiscal year 24-25. All departments. Are you going to be presenting that?
Yes.
Okay.
As you know, we have been presenting bundles for in prior years, and what we decided to bring forward this time is one long document that includes all the different department contracts that we have. Most of them are ongoing contracts. You've had a chance to review these over the last couple of days, hopefully at home. The contracts listed here can be viewed through three categories: academics, student and family service, and operations. And these are contracts that keep our district running in different directions. For example, in educational services, the contracts cover curriculum, instruction, assessments, and professional learning to support students, teachers, and administrators. These services will focus on new Year 1 and Year 2 curriculum implementations to ensure students receive high-quality Tier 1 instruction and Tier 2 interventions, and that teachers also receive the training needed to be prepared. Some of the expected outcomes from these contracts include implementation of grade level and engaging high-quality curriculum, increased academic achievement in ELA and math, highly trained teachers and administrators, and using more data-driven decision-making processes. For student and family services, some of these contracts have to be brought forward to support students and families both in and outside the classroom. These include mental health support and training platforms for staff. Additionally, some contracts are with partners who provide free services to our families and students. It's noted as a revenue contract or MOU. These are part of our services to provide wraparound services for our students. As Ms. Edison, who I like to call Dr. Edison, says, we have them 180 days. The community has them for 365 days. And we want to make sure that there are services that continue in some of those cases. For operations, some of these contracts, as Kim Hernandez said earlier, are mandatory and must carry over, like legal services and insurance. I'll point out that there are some increases and things that are out of our control, like our liability insurance, as was discussed earlier. Many other contracts have gone up due to increases caused by inflation. One contract I do want to call out from ETS is a new partnership with Parent Square. They currently handle our communications to family, but we're expanding that partnership next year with a pilot program to upgrade our website. I know that there's been a lot of concerns about our website, and the website that we've been using is outdated. This pilot that we're starting with Parent Square is free for the first year. We will pay for Final Site. That's the name of the current website user server that we use for one more year to host our webpage. But in this coming year, we will be making that transition. We have some schools that have already agreed to pilot the new Parent Square website. It's going to be a lot of work, but we hope to be able to streamline our communication platforms and bring a much-needed upgrade to both the district website and to our school websites, and have the ability to make easier upgrades and updates to these throughout the year and in the coming years. So with that, I'd like to ask for the approval of the ongoing contracts for the 24-25 school year. And I just want to remind the board that in my note to you this week, I added there's a few more coming in July that we were either waiting for amounts for or that we're still negotiating. But for the most part, this is it for our contracts for the school year.
Seeing no requests to speak, board members' comments and questions. Ms. Beal.
I just have a question about this process. Is there a way for the board to know if we are not renewing certain contracts, just so we have awareness of what we are continuing and what we are not continuing as part of the board memo report, maybe at least once every 6 months or once a year?
Are you speaking about renewing from 23-24 to 24-25 or 24-25 going forward?
These contracts appear to be going forward,
Yes.
correct?
Mhm.
So are there contracts we are choosing not to renew going forward?
Oh, I see. We did not put that together, but I can certainly ask the team to do that and send you a board memo that lists who was not renewed.
I think that just completes the circle of information
Okay.
of knowing what we're not renewing and if there is a particular reason, because we are responsive to the community on some of these issues.
Absolutely, we can do that. We'll prepare that for the board in
Thank
the
you.
coming weeks.
Mr. Escobedo.
So I would love to see examples of other schools that use this new website service as well. I don't know if it's brand new for Parent Square, or if there are other examples, so that we can just kind of see what the format looks like.
It's actually brand new. I think we're their pilot school district, if I'm correct, gentlemen? We're the second one. So yeah, we can see what the
Yeah,
other
so
one
maybe
is.
if there's something that they can show, or you can send us that
Sure.
gives us a sense of the format.
We can do that. Yes, I'm getting a thumbs up from Mr. Ramirez. Yes.
And then the second piece is it took a really long time to go through all these contracts because I didn't really actually expect this many contracts. I should have, but if it's possible for in the future, I do like it in one meeting, get it done. But in the future, if we can get this information or the contracts more in advance than our typical Friday. So I don't know what that looks like. Maybe speaking with our legal counsel to figure out what that might look like. And one thought that comes to mind is maybe we introduce it at one meeting and then the next meeting is when we make the decision.
So the idea is that next spring, we will be giving you updates as part of our budget development process, and you will hear from each department early in the spring what the thinking is around what will be services going forward or not. So by the time you get to this point in the year where you're doing a mass approval, you would have heard the thinking and the planning behind what will be coming forward by department throughout the meetings in the spring. So we'll bring like 1 or 2 departments at a time with the planning for what is happening in that department, what will be new or changed. As you know, we're talking about both a strategic plan and a reimagining of what the district is going to look like. So it will be brought up in chunks, but the final approval will be done in one meeting. So you would have heard throughout the spring what that will look like.
As long as when we make the final approval, I have a good understanding of what's in the contracts, and
That's the idea.
Then
Yes.
yes. But if not, if it's general terms about this is what we're thinking, like I want to actually look through these contracts, and a few days is pretty difficult.
So again, that you will hear that in each of the presentations with the contracts named. If you want to see terms and conditions, then that's a different ask, which I will check with legal about what that will look like.
Okay, thank you.
Additional comments or questions? Just to add on to that, I just want to appreciate this process, really trying to be more efficient with this process. And now that's coming to, and I recognize that that's a lot of information because this is the first time we're really seeing it like this. Typically, we've had by department each come in and making that presentation. But I think by our ask, how can we make it more efficient? And so we can expand that and or the process. And some of them, and just to to your level of what you're going to need that for, I'm just wondering if there's existing processes where if you need more information, like, do we have our fiscal committee that looks at all these things? I'm just figuring if there are existing processes where you can do that so that it's here, we're approving it because you've gone to that in-depth level as you have time to do so. So maybe we can think about something like that to meet those needs and be efficient in when we look at it here. This is certainly the expanding, giving us a little bit more information because we used to get them in the board and they were just under warrants and they were under things. And so to expand it out to give us a little bit more information. But I hear what you're saying, and so I'm just thinking if there's a process by which we can, do a committee can do that. If it's 2 members on it, we've gone in depth, and these are some questions we want to bring forth. So just figure out how we can do it in existing processes that we have and still get at to what your needs are.
Yeah, and if I could add, thank you for that. And the only reason why I have an interest in it is because folks do come and talk to us about some of these contracts or MOUs or a number of things. And so at least I want to have time to at least be familiar with what they're bringing up to us.
Yeah,
Right.
Part of why the Brown Act asks us to be very transparent about what's shared with all of the board is to be sure that we keep that line of what you're looking at and approving versus people coming to influence the board members on contracts.
Well, it's not, okay. Yes, and there are legitimate concerns that sometimes people bring up. It's not necessarily like lobbying for a contract, it's process or those sorts of things.
Yeah, so as we're continuing to refine and be more efficient in our processes, so we want to make sure that we build in a process of doing more in-depth conversation and discussion to that point. Ms. Beal?
Yes, I just want to reflect what Gabe Escobedo is requesting is, like you said, there's a lot of contracts, and it was mentioned that some of them are mandatory, like our insurance. We're not going to quibble over our contract with our insurance company. But for example, I asked a question about Crisis Go. My understanding of Crisis Go was that was the COVID app. And I was like, wait, are we still using the COVID app? But now I understand from my question that I asked of Superintendent Maldonado that it is really the way if we have an emergency situation, how we broadcast information out. So it is evolved for, in terms of our use. So I would almost like a little line saying this is our crisis emergency app, and even things that say this is mandatory. I mean, that we're required to have this. So when I look through this, I'm like, okay, this is what I have questions about. I think it's a good way for us as a district to also be keeping track of what we're using something for. I imagine everybody does, but it is a nice way for even as public documents for somebody to look at something and say, oh, this is what this is for. Because these are public documents and these questions do arise.
And we can add a column, so I really appreciate the questions and the comments as you stated, like what will help you take this in better. I did model this with the county process does with their contracts, but we could definitely add a column mandated, like this one you can, like you said, we don't recommend that you try to change this contract. So we'll do things like that as you think more of questions and things that we can do to make it easier for you to understand. That would be great.
I was gonna make the joke that they have a staff supporting them, so it's just us reading the contract.
We have a whole county.
Yeah, and that process has come over time, trust me, in terms of that. So this is the start of us refining our contract, what we need to do to respond. So noted. Don't be starting out with the county now, Gabe. Anyway, so with that, hearing no additional questions or comment, may I have a motion for approval? You do it, Gabe. So.
Shoot. I don't even know what I'm supposed to say.
Approval of ongoing contracts.
Motion to approve the ongoing contracts.
For 24-25.
For 24-25.
Okay, may I have a second?
I second the motion to approve the contracts.
Motion is second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, board members. So we are coming to the very, very close end, early end. So H, we have nothing to return. Coming events, you can look at that. Is there something we need to elevate out of that, Doctor?
The coming events is the July 18th summer graduation.
Yes.
Here in the board at 6 p.m.
Okay.
And then for future agenda items, I do just want to poll the board really quick about this board budget study session. If I can get a sense of, are we talking August, September, October? Can I just get some feedback on that? What are you guys thinking? Because we're going to add another meeting, right? This is going to be off of our regular pattern.
Yeah, I'm hoping September on myself.
Yeah, I'm good with that, and also in terms of timing of trying to, because I know there's a set of, we have something coming to us in September, right? The unaudited. Yeah, so we can. So maybe October or something like that.
Yeah, we could look at the governance calendar. We do have the unaudited actuals in September. It feels like probably around October, maybe.
Well,
might
that's
be
what
a
I was
good-
thinking.
good
October might
time.
be. With that, is that good about October? You'll get back with us and how that
Okay.
fits in. Which so
That's
great.
fine. I'll float dates later. Thank you.
Okay, then looks like we're going to close this meeting out and adjourn to our next meeting, Tuesday, July 16th. Same place, same time here.